Waking on the ground, he tried to recall what had happened. Memories of playing a video game in his room returned. He looked around and found himself in an unfamiliar forest. Sitting under a tree, he tried to work out his location. A caption identified him as Suzumiya Kid and gave his age as 21. After college, he devoted himself to the MMORPG Mazart Online, a game that gripped players and kept them online for long stretches. And after 3 nights straight, his headaches got worse, but he still waited for a rare item that usually dropped in 2 hours, yet did not appear even after 10, until his body started to feel oddly light, as if he was losing touch with reality. In a clearing of an unfamiliar forest, the boy noticed he was still in his everyday clothes, and that his body felt oddly light, like he had just woken from a deep sleep. So he looked around but could not tell where he was or how he had arrived, and the strange surroundings left him confused. The young man forced himself to stay calm and told himself it was just a dream. He figured he could not have stayed awake for 4 nights and must have simply fallen asleep, so he tried not to worry, kept walking through the forest, and thought he would have to apologize to the members of his Go party. Not far away, Kide saw a large 6-legged creature that looked like a dog, feeding beside the corpse of another animal. It noticed him and let out a threatening growl, and Kide froze in place, realizing the danger. 6-legged creatures advanced toward him, growling, and he stood motionless, assessing them and realizing that even asleep he still thought like a gamer. It felt strange to view the scene through game logic. He tried to map the situation to a real-life status anomaly. At first, Coyote stared, surprised to see RPG-style status parameters on the screen. The hero realized the system had answered him as the panel showed his name, level, stats, and skills, and froze, trying to understand why this was happening in the real world. The hero kept watching the status bar, focusing on the magic energy gauge. His MP read 10-12 units, unusually high for a first level. He wondered what average MP values were in this world. The description said magic energy, recovered at 10% per minute. This only confirmed his growing suspicion that the situation was unusual. Studying the parameters, the young man discovered the average MP for a normal person in this world was only 10 units, and his own MP was abnormally high, and he found a skill labeled alien from another world that puzzled him, along with talents in magic, martial arts, and mastery of all attributes, but he dismissed it all as a dream. Hida learned that the alien from another world skill altered many parameters, including how fast skills were learned and magic aptitude, and the system explained a character's strength depended on how important he had been in his previous world. But even with that logic, everything felt too real, so he touched a tree, amazed at how natural it felt, and kept telling himself it was only a dream while beginning to doubt it. Kina felt the 6-legged wolves closing in again. They stepped out of the forest and slowly closed in on him. One of the animals growled and did not look away. He recognized them from before and stayed calm, though the situation grew tense. Seeing the situation turn dangerous, Kita ran immediately. Though he thought it might be a dream, the fear felt real. Running, he was surprised to find he moved much faster than usual. It seemed his high rank as an alien from another world might explain it. This new agility surprised him and made him reassess his abilities. Kita felt horror when the 6-legged dogs chasing him matched his speed, and he tried to run but couldn't keep up, calling them green as loud growls came from every direction and danger felt close, so he realized running gave him no advantage and he had to find another way out. Kita climbed the tree to hide from the wolves chasing him. One dog stopped at the trunk and kept growling below. He noticed his jumping had become much stronger and felt relieved that it let him avoid an otherwise inevitable attack. Sitting on a branch, he quietly watched the scene and planned his next move. Perched in the tree, Kita knew he couldn't stay long because night was coming, and he worried about getting out of the forest quickly. The hero opened his status menu again to search for useful skills and scanned the list for anything that could help, his eyes showing he was determined to find a way out. Kita found an ability called Information Analysis in his skill list. The description said it let him evaluate objects or beings in his field of vision, so he concluded it must have been what showed him the earlier data, that it was likely a high-level skill, and he kept thinking how to use it in the current situation. Kita wanted to see if the analysis skill worked at range, so he focused on the nearest wolf and used it, and a readout for a creature called Green Wolf appeared showing rank F, 35 health, 0 magic, and high strength and agility, which Kita studied to find an advantage. Kita confirmed the creature was a wolf and assessed its strength. Despite its low rank, the wolf had a strength of 32, making direct combat dangerous. His abilities included a magic talent that speeds learning of spells and increases their power, and a combat talent was also present, but he did not yet know how to use magic and had no weapon. Kita opened the Equipment tab to check for items. When Kita opened the Items tab, he was surprised to see something seem to materialize from the panel. He felt a real object could appear in front of him. A list of cells appeared on the screen, but none were active yet. Kita stood at the interface, surprised and trying to understand how the system worked, feeling a mix of distrust and cautious interest. Kita saw an inventory interface and felt relieved to have an item panel. The maximum capacity showed 1012, matching his magic points. All slots were empty, so he concluded he had no items. It seemed the system might contain hidden commands he had not yet found. Perched in the tree, Kita kept analyzing the possibilities of the new world. Kita tried using magic, thinking the spell had to be spoken aloud. Shouting words like an incantation produced no effect, and he admitted his disappointment. Despite the high magical readings, flames never appeared in his hands, and he said it would be convenient if things worked that easily. A flame flared up before Coyote's eyes, making him jump back in surprise. This made him realize an actual fire sphere had appeared and led him to think it was a fireball spell. He concluded that casting magic might not require words but a vivid mental image, and the discovery gave him a new understanding of how magic works in this world. Kaida acted at once and tried the magic again, concentrating on a stronger fireball erupting from his hands while the wolves grew wary, and a surge of energy and joy he had not felt in a long time washed over him, making him realize that despite the danger he felt real excitement. Kita focused and aimed the fireball he had formed in his mind at one of the green wolves. The spell worked and the fiery ball burst from his hand, racing toward the target. Kita watched in amazement, realizing with delight that magic obeyed his imagination. This success was his first confirmation that the new experience was real. A high-speed fireball struck a wolf, triggering a powerful burst of flame. The creatures had no time to react and found themselves at the heart of the blast. Flames quickly filled the area amid screams of pain. Raging flames consumed the enemies entirely. The spell's effect was destructive and instantaneous. After a brief silence, he raised his hands and expressed his joy loudly. Then a strange sound came from his body and startled him, so he turned around abruptly, trying to understand what had happened. After hearing the sound, Kaida realized it was a level-up signal, and a stats panel appeared before him listing his name, age, race, and skills. He noticed his maximum magical energy had increased by 500 units, and that he had learned a new skill, level 1 fire magic, which he suspected came from using the spell earlier. Kita turned and saw the fire spreading rapidly through the forest, flames engulfing the grass and trees with a crackling sound. He watched in alarm as the blaze grew, not expecting such an effect from his spell. Struggling to put out the fire, Kita screamed from the heat and looked around for water. Thinking a nearby river might help, he instead remembered his magic. Focusing, he pictured a high-pressure stream like a fire hose, and a jet of water burst from his hand at the source of the flames. Kaid aimed his hand at the burning part of the forest. A message appeared on the screen confirming he had received Water Magic 1 and unlocked the first level. The fire began to die under the water jet's pressure, and the burned area quickly filled with moisture. A note below said the magic's effectiveness depended on the owner's intelligence and grew with higher skill levels. While casting a spell, Kita felt something leave his body and suspected it was tied to using magical energy. The screen showed his mana at 507 of 1512, and the reserve had dropped by only 1 unit, so he realized the spell used very few resources. Kita activated the storage interface and checked his inventory. An image with 2 cells containing items appeared on the screen. Exhaling, Kita leaned against a tree for a moment. Looking around, he realized everything that was happening was real. Kita sat on the grass and admitted it was not a dream. Night fell over the forest, and a waxing moon shone brightly in the sky. The boy replayed what had happened and tried to make sense of it. Stories came to mind of heroes who end up in other worlds. That possibility calmed him in a surprising way. The idea of being transported to another world slowly settled into his mind. Sitting on the grass, Keita thought about his life. His parents had died in a car accident 2 years earlier, and he had no relatives or close friends left. Figuring he had no ties to Earth, he assumed that was why he was here. Even so, knowing this was another world, he did not know how to return. The hero looked ahead with a slight smile and accepted what was happening. Realizing he couldn't go back, he chose to live in this world and try to enjoy his new life, hoping it would be bright and pleasant rather than dark and heavy. Kita sat on the grass when a loud scream cut through the air. Snapping his head up, he listened carefully and suspected someone else was nearby. A second scream left him more surprised and instantly alert. The situation demanded an immediate response. Kita sprang to his feet at the sound of distant shouts. A wagon lay surrounded by people and wild animals. The caravan appeared to have been attacked by several wolves. One man battled the animals to shield his companions. The beast growled and readied itself to attack. Kaido saw the attackers were green dogs and knew he had to act. Assessing the scene and finding his water magic could not reach them from that distance. A fire spell was too risky because it might hit the carriage, and despite his doubts he chose to try magic as the boy stepped forward ready to act. Kaida paused and focused, picturing the spell as a spear tip shooting forward, and a sharp stone spike burst from the ground toward the enemy, piercing one of the green dogs and marking the first time he used earth magic in combat. The stone spear struck the green dog's side and snapped. The beast screamed in pain but wasn't down. Keed watched in surprise and wondered if his magic strike had been strong enough, and the boy realized it might not be enough to end the fight. Though wounded, the beast growled and held its ground, still threatening, while the other dogs stayed in place watching, and Kita saw the attack had not stopped the enemies but only slowed them, giving him time to prepare the next step. The two fighters attacked the remaining dogs and struck decisive blows. One of them ordered the others to focus on the largest enemy. The partner confirmed he was ready to act together. The green dog, mouth open, rushed in to attack again. Kita watched closely without losing focus. The two warriors attacked the large dog together. One lunged with a spear and the other charged with a sword. The beast growled and rushed forward with its jaws open. Their blows met in a bright clash. Their strength was enough to stop the attacker. When the battle ended, Kaida moved closer and looked at the dead dogs. One of the men thanked Kaida for saving him. Another man said Kaida had come from the forest and did not look like an adventurer. They asked why he was there, and all three watched the stranger closely, waiting for an answer. Kaida said he woke up in the forest and did not remember how he got there, admitted he did not know why he was there, decided privately not to go into details and to stick to that version, and kept a calm, confident expression. A fighter asked whether Kita had been attacked by monsters in the forest, noting Kita seemed unharmed. The stranger said everything was fine and that he had simply been there. They thanked him and called for Korak. An elderly merchant came to the cart, introduced himself as Korak, thanked Kara for saving them, and asked whether the stranger had really helped. Karak tried to remember the man's name but mixed it up and called him Suzu. The other man corrected him, clearly saying Kaida. The merchant then apologized for the misunderstanding and said he now knew who stood before him, and the situation grew calmer. The merchant asked Kita if he had any money or any proof of his identity. Karak reminded Kita that he had mentioned memory loss and offered to help. Kita had nothing on him and admitted he could not prove who he was. The merchant said Kita might have lost his things in the forest and warned that he would not be allowed into town without identification, offering the money as collateral and to cover guild registration as he handed the boy some coins. Kita thanked him and apologized for the inconvenience, a handful of coins glittering in the merchant's palms and the gesture warm and given freely. Carefully examining the coins, Kaida hesitated and asked if they were silver. The merchant took this as doubt and asked again if the amount was enough. A man quickly said he meant no harm. An attendant suggested Kaida might have forgotten which currency was used. The misunderstanding was quickly cleared up. The girl in the dress spoke to the boy, checked that his name was Kitty, introduced herself as Salier, a receptionist from the Ain Guild, and asked him to call her Sali, then asked Karak to take the boy to the city because she felt awkward leaving him alone, and Karak agreed while Cade was a little surprised but did not object. As the carriage moved on, Sally began explaining everything from the start. They were on a forest road near Ain, she said. Keed listened closely and mentally sorted the details to summarize her story. Near a forest south of the city of Ain, their wagon stood in an area where monsters often appeared, making the journey dangerous, so Sally and Korak traveled with bodyguards, and the map of the city and nearby roads explained why their caravan was there. Sally told Kieti about the world's monetary system. The smallest coin was iron, followed by copper, silver, gold, and large gold. One iron coin equaled one tael, about 10 yen. After she finished, she said it was all for now. Kieti thanked her and tried to remember the new information. Sitting next to Karak, Kaidi saw the cart piled with goods, wondered why they used an ordinary cart instead of the world's storage boxes, and asked directly whether a magic container would be easier and why the merchant chose a more cumbersome way to transport them, while Karak listened with a smile. Heroic explained the storage box could only be used by people with magical talent, that such mages were rare and usually experienced adventurers or soldiers whose services were expensive, so merchants did not hire them, and that the box was mainly used to deliver valuable goods to nobles, so Keed realized he probably had the ability because of his magical talent. Kaid remembered he could hide his abilities and data on the status screen using his information analysis skill, so he decided to use it to avoid drawing attention, hide skills that looked rare, and review his skill screen to plan precautions, a step that should help him blend in with the people around him. Carriage carrying passengers pulled up at the city's main gate. Guards stood on both sides of the entrance watching the arrivals. Kaidi, Sally, and Karak rode in as it moved inside. A sign reading AIN hung above the arch, naming the city. The travelers had successfully reached their destination. A sleepy guard at the gate asked to see the boy's ID, and Katie looked confused because he had none. Sally said the boy had lost his papers. Then another guard said a deposit of 1 silver coin was required, pointed to a device, and told Coyote to touch it. Keed studied the magical device on the wall with interest and asked what it was. Sally said it was a tool that could assess anyone's personality by touch and added the city could not afford to let bandits in. The guards beside them watched their conversation in silence. He'd touched the magical device and quietly repeated bandits as he thought about what he had heard, and Sally said the deposit would be returned when he showed the guild card, reminded him that Carrick had already given him the registration money, and offered to go with him. The boy thanked her and thought she was very kind, and they walked forward with her, inviting him to follow. A magical device showed Coyote's name, age, race, gender, and level, and the boy was surprised he could read the inscriptions, realizing it was thanks to his full proficiency in extraterrestrial language, which also let him communicate with Sally without trouble, while a guard confirmed everything looked normal, saw no irregularities, and the displayed information raised no suspicion. The guard froze when he noticed K8A had a family name, a mark usually reserved for nobles. He changed his tone and apologized for his rudeness. The others, including Sally, did not at first understand, and Kaid looked puzzled about why the name had caused such a reaction. Tension filled the air. Kaid was surprised by the guard's reaction and began to wonder why. He assumed it was because of the family name, thinking only nobles could use it. Remembering that Carrick and Sally had given only first names, he doubted those were full names and realized he might have accidentally passed himself off as a noble. At that moment, someone activated a recognition spell to verify the information. When Keed activated the spell, Guido and Sailor's age, race, traits, and skills appeared on the screen, and he immediately noticed they had no last names, confirming his guess that only nobles had surnames, so a guard asked him to show his own data to clear things up, and Keed felt tense and uncertain. Keed's last name no longer appeared on the new status screen, and a guard who noticed found nothing unusual. The boy had quietly used his information analysis skill to hide the extra data, then apologized with a smile as if it were a misunderstanding, knowing he must be more careful when introducing himself from now on. Kyrie arrived at the Adventurers Guild in Ain City, a building with a massive wooden gate that stood out from the rest. Inside, several people were gathered, including a large, lizard-like warrior in armor, and a guild staff member greeted Kyrie and offered to start the registration while the atmosphere stayed businesslike and lively. Sally thanked K8 for his help and explained how to register with the guild. She said that after registering, he would receive a guild card to serve as identification and to give him access to quests. The registration fee was 3 silver coins. When she asked if he was ready to register, he said yes confidently. Sally then continued the registration at the counter. Sally put the magic box on the table and asked Coyote to touch it. Sally explained the device worked the same way as the tool at the city gate. The boy thought about how he needed to earn money to survive in this world. Smiling, the boy prepared to go through the registration procedure. Silver coins were already on the table for payment. Katie touched the box and an expanded list of his skills appeared on the screen. Sally thanked him, but seeing the details she froze in surprise and realized this interface showed more data than the one at the gate. The man noticed her reaction and asked whether everything was okay. Sally quickly said everything was fine, trying to hide her confusion. Sally handed Kate a guild card and began explaining. The card showed his name, race, and gender with his rank listed below. He listened closely and held the card. She said the ranks ran from G at the bottom to S at the top and asked him to take the information seriously because it would matter for his future activities. Sally continued to explain the guild's rank system. Rank increases depended on completing quests and defeating monsters. Advancing from rank D usually required passing a special test, though there were exceptions. An activity could lead to a lowered rank. The girl smiled as she delivered the important points clearly and distinctly. Sally explained the guild's rank system, saying rank increases depend on completing quests and defeating monsters. From rank D onward, you must pass a special test to advance, though there are exceptions, and inactivity can lower your rank. She smiled as she delivered the information clearly and distinctly. Sally explained that the 4th line on the map shows how many quests have been completed, and the 5th line shows how many monsters have been defeated, adding that the information updates automatically once a quest is completed. Coyote listened closely, holding the map in his hands. Kaini was surprised to learn about duels and that bandits were considered monsters, and Sally said a bandit on the list of defeated foes was not a violation, adding that if a bandit died in a mutually agreed duel, the killer did not become a bandit. Sally said it was impossible to forge a guild card. Any attempt would be exposed, and forgery carried the death penalty. Keed felt fear inside but kept his emotions in check. and when she finished explaining, she asked if he had any questions, to which he replied that everything was clear. Sally officially declared Cade an adventurer and reminded him to always take responsibility for his actions as a guild member. Cade thanked her for the clear explanation and agreed, then left while Sally watched him thoughtfully. A guild employee noticed the man use Sally's first name and said that was unusual. She teased her colleague that Sally might finally have met a decent man. Sally brushed off the conversation, calling it none of her concern and telling her to get back to work. Sally admitted to herself she had finally found the one she was looking for, and from the first glance she felt K8A was different, with her intuition saying he seemed to come from another world. Sally remembered Cade listening so attentively and taking everything so seriously. His rare abilities and skill in magic and martial arts amazed her. An inner voice told her he was her destiny. A soldier at the gate suggested an inn, so the boy stopped there, lay down on the bed not physically tired but drained by everything that had happened, and checked his inventory to see the items listed correctly, including the strange herb inside. Lying on his bed, the hero thought about the battle with the green dogs, realized he had acted recklessly and could have died, and decided to be more careful in the future now that bandits and duels exist in this world. At dawn, the boy looked out the window and worried about whether he could survive in this dangerous, unfamiliar world. Smelling the food, the man grew hungry and entered the restaurant, where a waitress greeted him immediately. Cade entered a cafe and was greeted by elf girls in maid outfits, and it was only when one of them politely asked if he was there for breakfast that he realized who they were. The man sat down eagerly and asked for the menu until the elf waitress pointed out it was already on the table. Watching with quiet admiration, he forgot his worries and happily accepted the new reality. After a hearty breakfast, Cade stretched, satisfied with the meal, and went to the guild to take on some quests. The hero stepped outside and headed to the guild, thinking about earning money and knowing he would need gear to travel beyond the city. Tired, the traveler stopped in the middle of the alley and realized he was completely lost. He looked around in alarm, saw he was in a deserted, sinister area, and decided to knock on a door and ask for directions. A man knocked on the door and politely asked for directions, but the stockman asked a suspicious question, and when the traveler said he was simply lost, the owner of the place was slow to trust him and wanted to know how he had ended up in the area. The salesman snapped that this was a weapons shop and that if the man wasn't going to buy anything, he should leave, and the traveler looked around the room in silence at the swords, spears, and shields hanging on the walls. Kite noticed the shop owner seemed unfriendly, but quickly told him he wanted to buy weapons, saying he was just about to, and was immediately asked about his budget. The man said he had 1,300 bodies and planned to earn more soon. The merchant looked doubtful and said 1,300 could not even buy a knife, surprised the man had so little money despite his martial arts talent. The hero said he had woken in the forest with no memory and no money, but had managed to earn a little along the way, and the merchant, seeing his confident movements, guessed that surviving there meant he must have considerable strength, and added that the young man's past was none of his business. The blacksmith refused to sell gear to anyone who could not use it, and asked the traveler to keep the shop secret. Then after sizing him up, he offered to forge a sword and shield for a price, noting the young man looked likely to become a real swordsman someday, which is why he did not send him away. Cade promised to return when he had money. The blacksmith briefly wished him luck and told him not to die. Cade inwardly noted that despite the rudeness, the man seemed to care. Before leaving, he asked the shop owner for directions to the guild. Cade approached the guild building and politely greeted Sally, who was carrying a stack of papers. He asked if he could take the quest, and Sally nodded, offering to come along to explain everything. Sally led him to the task board and told him to pick a task of the right rank and bring it back to the counter. Because Cade was still G rank, he could only take simple jobs like gathering herbs or helping with cargo. He accepted a quest to collect herbs. Sally explained it was about zanana, a herb used to stop bleeding. The guild was low on it and would pay 30 bodies per herb. Cade, surprised, asked whether the herb was rare. Sally said it was not rare on its own, but a poisonous zanana usually grew around it, so people could not gather much and most only found it by accident. Cade opened his pack and showed the herb he'd found, asking if it was suitable. Sally immediately recognized the plant and confirmed it. He thanked her for the explanation and realized he knew where to look, the same forest where he had first woken up. Later, Cade went back into the forest to look for grass but couldn't find any. Tired, he realized he still hadn't managed to collect anything. Inspecting the herbs he had gathered, the young man realized he had overlooked poisonous plants and that their poison was weak and only fit for minor mischief. He tried using his information analysis skill to identify the herbs he wanted. The idea was to use the skill like a radar. At first, it didn't work. Holding one of the samples, a symbol appeared, and the boy realized it was the required Zanana herb and that the mark probably only appeared when he saw it. After reactivating the skill, many symbols glowed, and he realized he could now quickly gather the required amount of grass. Sally was surprised by the number of plants he had collected and asked whether he had mistaken any of them for poisonous ones, and Keed said he had used the appraisal skill and checked each specimen. He noted that every sample exceeded 15 centimeters, as the task required. Sally started inspecting, and the device unexpectedly reacted to the collected plants. Sally snapped at the man for claiming he had the evaluation skill to sort herbs, reminded him he didn't have it the last time, and questioned him suspiciously about how he had gathered so many, and the man tried to explain but looked clearly confused. Coyote said he did have the skill, even though it didn't show in his status. That was how he managed to gather so much of the needed grass. The girl looked at him doubtfully, wondering if this was too far-fetched. After admitting she had overreacted, the guild employee apologized and recalculated the payment for the grass 6090 phone, leaving the man relieved that he had avoided unnecessary suspicions, while Sally still doubted, but accepted the result. The next day the boy returned to the gunsmith's shop to buy the shield he'd ordered. After a short hello, he explained why he had come. The blacksmith answered curtly and soon shouted for him to stop chatting and come inside. As the guest looked around the room, the blacksmith kept working on the piece. The boy saw the engraved name Dovra and thought it might be the blacksmith's. The master focused on finishing the forging. When the work was finished, Dover asked if the boy had brought the money. The boy confirmed everything was ready and said he knew magic and that the shield would be very useful to him. The blacksmith looked surprised the boy had returned sooner than expected. Keed was surprised to discover he had a talent for magic and asked if he needed a staff. When the blacksmith heard this, he advised that given the young man's fighting talent, it would be better to focus on the path of a swordsman. The man said this was the first time he'd heard of a mage without a staff, since without it, it's hard to focus while moving, and casting magic is much slower without a special tool. Realizing the power of magic was the same, but it would be hard to hit the target without speeding up the spell. He concluded the staff still increased speed and planned to use it to improve his abilities. Although he admitted he might want a staff later, he chose to be cautious. The blacksmith warned that many skilled people had died from overconfidence. When they talked about the shield, the blacksmith handed him one to hold, and as the young man tried it on, he felt grateful for the craftsman's kindness. One of the shields seemed to have the right weight and feel, and the blacksmith, again judging by sight, immediately chose it, surprising the guy again. Satisfied with his work, the blacksmith asked the client for his opinion. The man studied the shield he had just received and admitted it looked decent. Holding the shield, the newcomer felt it become part of him and realized Master Davra truly knew his craft. The boy began talking about forging swords and asked if tempering was used, but the blacksmith did not understand what he meant. A young man explained the idea. The metal heats from the strike and then cools quickly. The blacksmith tried the suggested method, but the workpiece became distorted. Surprised by how hard the metal had become, he suggested that slow cooling after slight heating could have made the material softer. Dover admitted he did not know where the young man learned such knowledge, but found it interesting. Closing the forge for 2 days, he promised that if the sword experiment succeeded, he would give it away free. Watching the blacksmith leave, Katie found the service rude, but Davro seemed simply passionate about his work, so he decided to ignore it. The next day, the boy went into the city to learn more about the local adventurers, uncomfortable using evaluation on people, but determined to gather as much information as possible. Analysis showed that mages and ordinary fighters had nearly the same magic level, and almost no one had rare skills like magic talent or battle talent. Kaidi scanned the stalls and found nothing special except magical meat for sale. He settled on a bun with green wolf filling. He noticed clothes here were cleaned of dirt with just water and remembered his previous world, admitting he especially missed the chance to take a bath. Busy collecting grass, Kaidi did not notice the evening, and when he realized it was already dark, he decided to return to the city. A green wolf suddenly attacked Keed from above. Dodging the blow, Keed readied his strike for when it landed. A man sent a fireball at his opponents, but several wolves were nearby, and he realized he was deep in the forest and the situation was getting dangerous. Surrounded by growling beasts, he tried to assess the situation, but realized he was at a disadvantage. Casting the fireball again, he leveled up during the attack, saw only 2 enemies left, and then realized one was still hiding. A wolf attacked from the tree above, and Kaid was caught off guard by the enemy's sudden strike. The beast knocked him down, leaving him in a dangerous position. After taking hits, he focused and visualized the spell to activate the magic. Kaid unleashed the stone spear spell, hitting multiple enemies at once. the magic struck the wolves from every side and dealt heavy damage. One of the wolves was taken down, but the others reacted and surrounded Kaidi. The man admitted he hadn't been careful enough and almost paid for it. Later he returned with the plants he had collected, which shocked everyone around him, and the girl who accepted them said she had stopped trying to apply common sense to him. Keed said he had been gathering zanana all day, had gone too far and encountered wolves, and calmly explained he had defeated them with magic. Sally was surprised to find out he had fought a pack of green wolves alone. It was hard for her to understand how a mage could face such monsters. The boy explained he used a shield to defend himself while attacking with magic, and the girl said that such a combination required intense concentration and should not be possible. She suggested calling a mage or using a potion to heal him, but he said he wasn't injured and grew curious about restoration spells, deciding to learn more about magic. Noticing his mana was over 2,000 and regenerated faster than normal, the hero studied the world's traits and resolved to use stronger spells and find a way to compensate for his limited perception. Determined to improve his magic, he aimed to become a magical swordsman using his cheat ability. The boy went into the forest to practice and learn how his magic worked. He focused on search magic to compensate for his poor perception. Experimenting, he imagined the magical energy flowing from his hand to the tree. Directing the magical energy at the target, he was surprised to see it begin to take shape in midair. Feeling how his magic let him sense the tree bark's texture, the boy decided to extend the spell's reach and focused on expanding its coverage to test how far it could detect. When the magic spread too wide, a torrent of information poured into his mind, overwhelming him and causing him to lose control. The boy could barely stand. After activating the magic, his face showed complete exhaustion. He knew he couldn't use that spell in a real fight because his head was full of useless information and he felt like he was about to explode. Kaid realized the spell was overloaded because he had not specified what he wanted to find. To fix it, he tried again, broadened the magic around him, and filtered it by analyzing the information. When the boy activated the magic, a window with a circular map appeared before him, and he realized it only showed objects within a certain radius. The magic then shifted its form on its own, which surprised him, and he figured overlapping the search maps would reveal more information. He announced happily that he had succeeded after completing a simplified magic radar, and a circular map on the screen in front of him showed the new spell was active. Analyzing the new magic skill, the hero finds the perception radius now reaches 50 meters, and maintaining it costs nothing, so he will not be caught off guard. He learns the spell is called Magic of Perception. Remembering the blacksmith promised to give him the sword in 3 days, the hero decides to go to him. Along the way, the tempering process intrigues him. At the forge, the hero greets the blacksmith and asks if the sword is ready. The blacksmith yawns with fatigue and says it is ready. Surprised by how strong the sword's metal is, the hero thinks the charcoal-forged metal is probably steel and concludes the blacksmith had used wrought iron before, which is less hardened. Dovrag reveals he made the sword yesterday, calls it one of his best works, and recommends using it until the hero finds B-class material. Reluctantly, the hero agrees to try the sword the blacksmith hands him, and though he has never swung a sword before he takes it in his hands. The boy swung his sword without realizing his body had already reacted. He was surprised at how natural the strike felt, and the blacksmith watched with interest. The master realized the boy wasn't a newbie and assumed he had wielded a sword before. The boy smiled, surprised his martial arts skills had proved so useful. Kaid hesitated to keep such a useful sword, but the blacksmith said it was no problem since he could make the weapon more stable, and Kaid wondered whether he had been too generous with his techniques. Calmly, the hero said he did not mind his knowledge being shared because the techniques were meant to be used, and he had nothing to lose by passing them on. Dovreg asked whether the boy went without armor because he was a mage. The boy replied that if he had to pick, he would choose light armor that wouldn't restrict his movement. Realizing he had liked his shield all along, the boy admitted he had completely forgotten to protect his body. The blacksmith offered leather armor that suited his needs. The hero listened as Dovreg said he only worked with metal armor, but recommended a leather craftsman and told him to ask for that craftsman when he visited. He wondered who he would meet, maybe another dwarf. At the store, a girl greeted him warmly and immediately noticed he was new. He said he came on Dovreg's recommendation and needed armor, and she was surprised Dovreg himself would send such an inexperienced adventurer. Noticing the sword's resemblance to Dothra's work, the girl asked to examine it. With permission, she inspected the blade easily, showing solid knowledge. The hero noted to himself how attentive she was to detail. Testing the sword by cutting the object, the girl was pleased with the steel's quality. The hero stood stunned, noticed no one else in the shop, and began to suspect she was the craftsman. Smiling, the girl confirmed the sword came from the Dover of Forge and admired the quality of the steel. It was her first time seeing such a blade, and Keed assumed she was the master in question. The craftswoman explained that a good sword requires proper armor and offered to make it to order. Interested, the hero asked what materials were available. She answered that she could make armor from any suitable material. Keed looked at the green wolf skin, heard it had low defense and was vulnerable to fire, added that it would immediately burn away if hit, and with limited choice they settled on Gargan skin. She said her shop targeted beginners, so she couldn't afford costly materials, and he wondered why that made her proud. He saw the armor on the mannequin and asked if it was part of the collection, and she said it automatically activates magical protection using the wearer's mana, but consumes so much mana that almost no one uses it. The man was glad the armor would fit him perfectly because his mana regenerated quickly. The woman said the armor was now just a shop display. He used the analysis skill to check the armor's stats. Realizing the armor used 20 mana an hour, and his mana let him use it indefinitely, the hero concluded it would be useless for ordinary adventurers. He asked about the armor's price and protection, and the girl said it matched Gargonian leather in strength, so it cost the same. The man said he'd try the armor despite the girl's warning, added that if it proved unsatisfactory, he'd switch to the leather version, and she reacted with relief and approval. After taking his measurements, she said the armor would be ready the next evening and asked him to come when the evening bell rang. He agreed. Kaidi asked if she sold anything besides armor and said he wanted to buy a staff, so the girl told him to check the magic shop next door. The moment he said his intention, the sorceress appeared at once, surprising everyone, and the girl complained that the sorceress had accessed her store without permission. The man was amazed at the sight of a real sorceress, noting she looked like a typical magician. She smiled warmly. The sorceress confirmed she sold various goods, took the man's hand, and led him into her store. The girl said he had been recommended by Dovriksana, and he was surprised by how popular that name was. The merchant led Katie into a spacious, high-ceilinged room where magical lamps floated in the air, and the boy looked in surprise at the sheer scale of the scene. The saleswoman stepped up to the staff display and asked which one Coyote wanted. He looked over the many different models in the case with obvious admiration. She explained that the staff's length directly affects how fast magic works. The longer the staff, the faster the spell, but it becomes harder to control as it grows. The merchant held up a 60 cm staff, pointing out that it was slow but handy for fighting in tight dungeon spaces. Keed considered it and agreed it was a logical choice for those conditions. Smiling, Kate asked whether she had a staff that would triple the speed of magic. The merchant laughed softly and explained a 20 cm staff would be impractical and useless. Noting he uses both a sword and a shield, he would prefer a staff that would not interfere in combat, and added that his magic is already fast enough, with a threefold increase being optimal. Cade noticed the merchant thought his words were odd, but she agreed to make the staff by tomorrow, and warned she would not be held responsible if it proved useless. The young man thought he'd be satisfied if he got the staff he wanted, and he noticed magic swordsmen were rare in this world because magic required concentration. The merchant laughed at K80's suggestion to cut off part of the staff, and the boy, excited that his equipment would soon be ready, didn't fully understand how the staff was put together. The next day, Keed went to the guild to discuss a promotion. A staff member acknowledged his contributions were enough to advance. She explained that to earn the first promotion, you had to complete one of the simple tasks. Coyote realized it was part of the overall experience system. Kaidi checked the task list and saw that G rank included jobs like picking up trash and hauling cargo, so he hesitated over which to take. Kayat accepted the iron ore transport mission, even though it was seen as odd, and a guild member said the task was unpopular despite being valid for rank advancement. Sally, a fellow guild member, tried to stop Keed from taking the quest by pointing out its drawbacks, but he insisted he could handle it because he had a spatial inventory. Kai discovered that the spatial inventory's capacity depends on its maximum mana both when opened and while in use, and a guild member explained how the slot calculation works. Kaid realized the number of slots in his spatial inventory matched his initial mana pool, and each slot had a capacity limit, so he decided the quest would benefit him and thanked him before leaving. Keed ran across the field with the furry creature at 20 kilometers per hour. Surprised by his own endurance, he thought that at that pace he could beat the Olympians in a marathon. Keed noticed that after leveling up he could run all day without getting tired. When he reached the village, he approached the man at the entrance, said he was on a mission from the guild, and showed his card. Pointing to a huge pile of iron ore, the man told the hero to take as much as he could carry. The guy confirmed he understood everything, and the worker was convinced the ore was real. Watching Kade, he was struck by how fragile he looked and doubted he could handle it. A sudden strong premonition swept over him, and he watched the scene with growing tension. When Keed began collecting the ore, he said he had put about 1,500 kilograms in his box, which amazed the worker because such boxes usually hold no more than 200 kilograms. Admitting he needed help with transportation, the man offered to keep working for Kate in the future. The other man said he was willing to help, but did not know how long he would stay in the city. Keed noticed his box had filled only one slot. The man, surprised, asked whether more could fit, and the boy confirmed they could. Kite chuckled softly after saying he had more than 1,000 free cells, and when the man asked in shock whether he was the embodiment of the box, Kite replied that he was still a person. The workers at the processing plant watched in amazement as Coyote delivered a huge load of ore. Coyote calmly said he had only brought what he could, totaling 10 tons. A worker asked how many times the boy had made the trip, and was shocked to learn that Katie had brought everything in one go, and he admitted he could have brought more, but was stopped to leave room for future deliveries. Having delivered the ore, Coyote was promoted to F rank. The merchant froze in shock, then tried the shortened staff, which fit perfectly despite his doubts about its usefulness. Keed thanked her and confidently said the equipment was more than enough, fully prepared for new challenges, while his companion watched him with a smile. Smiling at the staff's cute appearance, the girls watched as Ked soon sped off, ready for new challenges in the forest. Planning to test his gear in a real fight, he pushed deeper into the forest. When his device signaled, he spotted something on the radar and rushed to the target, ready for a confrontation. The boy stood face to face with a huge pack of green wolves and feared their numbers exceeded his ability to fight, estimating about 500 and knowing that retreating could accidentally lead them into the city. With no other option, Keed joined the fight and drank a potion he had bought earlier from the magic shop that boosted his mana recovery tenfold. Activating the enchanted gear, he realized it was useless to ordinary mages but perfect for him. Wolves closed in, and he took a fighting stance, ready to attack. With the enemy in range, the boy cast the rock spear spell, and stone spears erupted from the ground, striking the wolves from above and leaving them confused. Satisfied, he saw that the spell had worked. Katie watched the wolves and remembered how he had studied magic and learned how it worked during his training. The boy thought about spell amplification mechanics. Increasing mana tenfold did not increase the attack radius proportionally. He could boost the power, but not at more than 10 mana per second. Facing numerical superiority, the hero cast the fireball spell, launching a series of fireballs at the enemies and using multiple spells to deal with their numbers. Scorched wolf bodies littered the field after the attack, and the battle system issued a notification as he watched the result from a distance. Despite their losses, the remaining wolves pressed on while the hero cast another spell and fell back, keeping his distance. Spinning, he unleashed a new series of attacks, filling the area ahead with firebolts whose explosions threw the attackers back. The hero watched the destruction and the wolves' remains, noting that the creatures behaved in a primitive, predictable way. Standing on the charred ground, he realized the attack had ended almost instantly, and that despite its success, it had lasted just 3 minutes. Kaidi studied the battle results with satisfaction, confident in his efficiency, and saw he had spent 3 minutes effectively, with his current stats and skills displayed beside them showing many types of magic and high intelligence and agility. After facing 513 green wolves, he wondered whether such large packs were normal. He decided to return and report to his partner. First, he planned to collect everything left from the fight. A creature was behind him. A massive creature covered in thick, scaly armor hunted other beasts. It crept forward slowly, making dull sounds that shook the ground. Surprised, Sally asked if he had really defeated 513 green wolves, said such creatures rarely gathered in large packs, and wanted to know where he had found them, and the boy calmly explained he had noticed them about 15 minutes after entering the forest. He'd wondered if it was bad luck or if he had gained a lot of experience. The girl said 100 wolves was normal but 500 was not. She relaxed when she saw he was fine and offered to buy 100 green wolf carcasses from him. He agreed calmly. The boy came to Dovreg and asked him to repair his sword and shield. The master examined the gear and immediately realized the boy had been hunting green wolves, and from the weapon's condition, judged the hunt had lasted more than 2 days. Dovreg inspected the gear, saw Keed's shield scratched by the green wolf's claws, and the sword clearly used to attack multiple opponents at once, and concluded Keed had already killed hundreds of monsters. Dovro doubted the boy's claim that he had become a better fighter after his stats rose, admitted he had underestimated Katie at first, but was now impressed by the boy's progress, and Katie was amazed by the blacksmith's insight. After finishing the repairs, the blacksmith said he had only fixed the sword because the shield was in good condition and was about to advise replacing the weapon before changing his mind. Cade thanked him, slightly surprised by the decision. Dovreg explained Coyote's sword, though strong, was only iron and noticeably weaker than a weapon made of rare or special metal, so the blacksmith advised him to keep a spare sword in reserve. Cade asked how much a sword made from dragon material would cost. Dovreg said they start at 4 billion bodies because only a few dragon parts are suitable for forging. The blacksmith added that dragons are so rare they are considered legendary monsters, and a dragon's appearance can destroy entire countries and throw the world into chaos. He'd asked what material would be suitable for the sword if dragon metal was too expensive, and Dovreg said the metal from the body of a metal lizard, a B-ranked creature whose skin is covered in a hard shell, would work. The blacksmith said the metal lizard skin was used to forge swords. Such creatures were so tough ordinary swordsmen stood no chance, and if one appeared in a small town without powerful mages, it would cause chaos. Kai had assumed he wouldn't encounter these monsters for a long time, but he still wanted to try to defeat them later. Dovreg said metal lizards even outmatched dragons in physical defense, and a sword made from their material would cost at least 5 million. The next day, Kaidi went to the guild building and found it closed, with a notice on the board announcing an emergency and calling all able fighters to the forest gate. A crowd had gathered at the gate, so Keed approached Sally to ask what was happening, and she, surprised, called his name and then told him the details. Sally said that after Keed warned about the green wolves, scouts were sent out. The scouts found a large number of monsters moving toward the city. Keed's warning gave the guild time to prepare. Fighters gathered at the city gates, talking about how they would have to hold off the attack, and Keed observed that from the girl's words many enemies were coming, so it was fortunate the threat was discovered early or the city might have been destroyed. Sally warned that some attackers were monsters with strong ramming power, so the gate alone would not hold, and she asked Kade to take the front lines, promising a reward for everyone who joined the battle. The boy hesitated, saying he was a newbie, but Sally said the city's monsters were weak, and he was one of their strongest adventurers, while the girl asked for help on the front lines, and Katie was surprised the guild was really that weak. Cade agreed to help because he had no choice. Sally thanked him and said he'd be a key figure in the defense. One of the fighters told Sally their squad was ready to move with Cade. Cade suddenly ran toward the forest, and the others, including Sally, watched his abrupt dash in surprise, while Sally, confused, did not understand why he ran off so quickly. Racing forward, the young man realized he could not refuse the mission because he was attached to this place, so he chose to fight on the front lines to gain experience and vowed to stop the monsters from invading the city. Kite knew his mana was limited, even with the accelerated recovery potion, and estimated he could sustain full power for about 20 minutes, so he decided to ration his power. Prepared for both close and distant threats, he planned to use his sword on nearby foes and cast spells at those farther away as wolves closed in, yet he stayed focused and ready to strike. Cade felt his magic strengthen after leveling up and gained confidence, but a huge boar burst from the forest, and he felt alarm as he realized he faced a new enemy. Kaidi immediately cast the stone spear spell at the beast, but even repeated attacks could not stop the monster, which remained a threat. Realizing it was probably the monster the girl had mentioned, the young man activated identification and discovered it was a gorgon with immense power despite having almost no mana. Although 7 spells had cut the monster's HP by only 30%, its HP suddenly fell to 0, and Keed suspected a critical hit but still doubted he had actually defeated the creature. Kesar noticed the monsters acting strangely, and unlike the green wolves he'd met earlier, all of them moved in a straight line, as if fleeing something unseen. He went the way they had come, hoping to learn why. Higher up he saw a clear trail of creatures all moving in the same direction. That order alarmed him. Moving forward, the young man confirmed his suspicion that the wolves were fleeing the threat, and wondered what could have scared so many monsters and what lay ahead on their path. A moment later, a giant metal lizard appeared in front of him. It had enormous strength and speed, no magical energy, and a frightening appearance. Keed recognized it as the metal lizard Dovrag had mentioned. All the monsters were fleeing it. Although it had less health than the Gaogan, its armor made it very hard to damage. Realizing going into battle alone was a bad idea, the boy decided to return immediately and report everything to the guild, but then he saw something in the nearby forest that put him on guard. The metal lizard roared and suddenly gave chase, and Keed, shocked by its speed, realized the enemy was faster than him. The boy stepped back, but the monster closed in fast. Physical attacks, even his rock spear, would be useless against the monster's heavy armor. Keed spent a minute focusing his magic to raise his attack power, and then released a powerful spell called Great Fireball. The spell hit its target, but the metal lizard stayed unharmed. The boy froze in shock, not expecting the attack to fail. The monster rushed forward and easily threw Keed back, landing a blow he had no time to defend against. Kaidi felt the blow graze his leg and break the bone. He thanked fate for the healing magic he had learned, because a direct hit would have been instant death. That monster could not be allowed into the city. Keed vowed he would defeat the enemy, and realizing he lacked a penetrating spell, decided to create one based on his earlier earth magic. The young man tried to activate the new magic, but it failed, leaving him surprised and wondering if some other special condition besides imagination was needed. Realizing he had little chance with his current spells, Keed remembered one option and, despite the approaching danger, chose special magic because it can be stored to increase the power of an attack. He figured the metal lizard's armor was like a tank's, so the only way to get through it was to apply pressure. Keed chose a spell called Magic Pressure 3 inches, which I had studied during training. Going all in, he poured his remaining mana into the spell, and must now hold out for 15 minutes while dodging the enemy's attacks, especially the tail throws. Cade read the enemy's move with his combat sense and managed to deflect the attack, yet he still felt intense pain as he defended himself. After finishing his preparations, Cade reported that 15 minutes had passed and focused on finding a weak spot in the monster's armor, choosing an area that was rarely hit. Seeing the metal lizard's back as the weakest spot, the boy moved in quickly to strike from behind. Screaming, he launched one last attack, pouring every remaining ounce of strength into trying to break through the monster's armor. The pressure spell struck its target, tearing a hole in the lizard's body as energy poured out and engulfed the monster. The boy watched the beast's reaction, teeth clenched with tension, hoping the blow had worked and wondering if he had won. The monster screamed and writhed in pain. Breathing hard after the attack, Keed watched his opponent's reaction to judge if the fight was over. Keed breathed heavily as he watched the metal lizard collapse, its armor pierced. Barely holding back a smile and still in disbelief, he said he had managed it after all. The battle was over. Cade walked through the forest scanning with his radar, convinced the monsters driven out by the metal lizard had retreated and the area was safe, and he hoped his companions were okay when he soon heard Sally calling his name and saw her rush to him in relief, glad he was safe. Kylie calmly asked why the girl thought he might be dead. The girl said he had disappeared after the monsters had already retreated and accused him of charging ahead alone. Sally screamed at the boy, accusing him of making her worry. She could barely hold back her tears, and he lowered his head and apologized, taken aback by her strong reaction. The girl scolded the boy for following her instructions too literally and putting his life at risk, and Cade tried to explain himself, but admitted she had said something like that. The girl asked what he had been doing as the other monsters retreated. The warrior calmly explained he had been exploring the area after finding a metal lizard. Cade said calmly that he'd already defeated the metal lizard. Sally panicked and considered calling the mages for help because of the threat, and Cade's words left her stunned. Smiling, the boy said he believed the other creatures had retreated because he had defeated the monster. The girl was shocked by what she heard. Sally remembered that Cade mixed magic with swordplay, and that explained his success. She asked if he could use wind magic, and the boy was surprised. The girl explained defeating such a monster usually takes a group of C-rank mages or higher, saying you must lift the lizard with wind and burn it from the inside with fire, and then asked how Cade had managed it alone. The man said he had pierced the armor from behind with his magic and wondered if this monster was less protected, adding that he could show the body in his inventory. Sally confirmed it was a metal lizard and was surprised, thinking the damage was on its back. As they examined the body, Cade offered to help, which confused her. Pointing to the hole in the lizard's armor, the boy watched the girl awkwardly ask to go first. He apologized, and she sat down beside him, still surprised. Examining the hole in the monster's body, the girl said she'd never heard of any magic that could cause such destruction, and concluded its magic was fundamentally different from theirs. After thanking Cade for defeating the lizard, she said she would report to her superiors. The man moved to leave, but she then asked him to go with her. At the guild, the boy immediately bowed and apologized to the older man, who was surprised but told him to stand and explained they had long suspected something was wrong with the monsters. Admitting his mistake, the guild leader said he had ignored the science behind a powerful monster and thanked Cade on behalf of the whole guild, noting that without Cade there would have been many casualties. The young man said the victory had not been easy and that the situation was clear. No one could have predicted such a powerful enemy. The old man then praised him for both his strength and his understanding. Cade was surprised when the guild leader asked her to keep their victory over the metal lizard secret. He said he wanted to avoid panic and misunderstandings among the residents. The guild leader said even rumors of a metal lizard would cause a stir, and he doubted anyone would believe an ordinary adventurer could defeat such a monster. He said it was only a request and that the guild could announce it officially if Kade wanted, but the young man smiled and declined the publicity. Kede admitted it would be hard to keep the secret because he wanted to tell Dovreg. The guild leader did not object to hearing the name and said he was good at keeping secrets and rarely interacted with others. The guild leader said the city had no equipment to work on the metal lizard and told Kade to go southeast to a dwarven mining town with special workshops for the job. Kede headed to the forge town of Herrera to forge a weapon from the metal lizard's remains, aware that it meant leaving town since few strong monsters remained nearby. With little time left before leaving, the boy decided to say goodbye to those who had helped him and learned it was better to travel at night and rest during the day in this world. Blacksmith Dovrag apparently already knew the boy would leave the city. Katie came to the girl with a bunch of grass and said that he was going to leave the city. She was surprised and immediately asked if this was related to the conversation with the guild leader. The boy explained that he was going to the city of Herrera to make a new weapon. The girl thought about how rarely adventurers left the cities and tried to contain her excitement. He said the metal lizard he had already defeated caused the trouble with the green wolves. The girl agreed the city was safe now, even without him. Looking back on his first days in this world, Katie felt lucky to have met a kind girl like Sally. Sally nodded and suggested he wait to sell the weed. After they said goodbye, he thanked her for everything and said he hoped they'd meet again. She picked up a blade of grass and smiled, saying she also hoped for another meeting. Sally said goodbye with a smile, hoping to meet again in the future. The guy who was looking at her also said goodbye silently, setting off on his way through the mountains. On the 5th day of the journey, Keed noticed that he had reached the halfway point of the route to Herrera. He estimated that he was moving twice as fast as a horse and would soon reach the city. The map showed a group of people moving along the road in the forest. He was surprised to see strange silhouettes that looked like scenes of abduction. Hiding behind a tree, the young man saw a group of armed men holding a tied-up child and followed them to see what was happening. He thought that such criminals were called bandits. His suspicion grew when he realized that one of them was guarding a prisoner. Convinced he had to confirm they were bandits, he prepared to act since the guild required them to be killed or captured. The young man used his recognition skill and confirmed that all 6 men were indeed bandits. He prepared for his first fight against humans, realizing the seriousness of the situation. A bandit slipped away claiming he needed to relieve himself, making the others suspicious, and soon a strange sound came from the forest that alarmed the whole group, so the leader ordered 2 subordinates to find the source of the noise, and they went deeper into the forest. 2 bandits came across a strange tree, cut by a powerful blow. One of them approached in surprise, unaware of the danger. At that moment, the young man quickly jumped from the tree, attacking from above. Kaidi used pressure magic, attacking several opponents at once. The flow of force threw the bandits back, causing them to suffer sharp pain and lose their balance. Despite the weak mark, the magic was powerful enough to disrupt their physical condition. The other bandits stood up from their seats with difficulty and fear when the young man approached them. One of them managed to start a question, trying to find out who he was, but did not have time to finish. At this time, the warrior decisively moved forward, leaving no doubt about his intentions. The hero stood among the bodies of his fallen enemies and breathed a sigh of relief. He admitted that he had only wanted to capture them, but even the weakened magic had proven deadly. Although it was his first time killing people, he felt no guilt. Katie approached the girl he had just freed and noticed that she was not coming to her senses. After checking her condition with his skill, he saw that she was under the influence of forced hypnosis, and he did not immediately understand how this condition could be cured. The young man reached the city, carrying the girl in his arms, and still did not understand how exactly the spell of forced hypnosis worked. He hoped that there would be a way to cure her, and asked for help from the guards who approached the gate. The enraged, bearded man, seeing the unconscious girl, shouted at Katie, demanding an explanation and accusing him of what he had done to his daughter. The warrior was confused, not immediately understanding what he was being accused of. The dwarf ran up to the young man, recognizing the victim as his daughter, and immediately accused him. Keed panicked and tried to explain, saying that he had found the girl in the forest and saved her from bandits, but mentioned the strange spell she was under. 2 guards rushed to intervene, calming the situation. One of them assured Keed that forced hypnosis could be easily cured with medicine, and the other thanked him for saving the girl and offered to carry her himself. After the misunderstanding, Kide was told that his daughter had not returned from the forest, and he was in despair. The other guards calmed the situation by noting that dwarves were hot-tempered. The dwarf apologized to the boy for the false accusation. The dwarf introduced himself and thanked the boy for saving his daughter. He offered to help him in the city if he needed anything. Then he invited him to join the celebration in honor of the girl's return, without listening to the question about the forge. At the feast, everyone was happy about the girl's rescue, raising their mugs. Keed noted that the dwarf did not listen to him, but he realized that he was too happy about his daughter's return. He noticed tools similar to those in Dover Egg's workshop. The girl approached the guy and thanked him for saving her, calling herself Sumisa. She admitted that she did not remember what happened to her, but she looked like she had already recovered. Sumisa confirmed that she was feeling well and apologized for delaying his journey. She wondered if he was traveling as an adventurer. The girl suggested using a local workshop if he needed to make a weapon. Kaya was surprised to learn that they could actually process lizard metal and began asking about the cost. Upon hearing the price, the warrior realized that he did not have enough money. However, Sumizu's father, offered to make the weapon for half the price as thanks for saving his daughter. Kaid asked if he could sell the materials, claiming he had a metal lizard body. His words were met with disbelief, but he decided to show off the contents of his inventory in person. After the appearance of the huge metal lizard body, everyone was amazed. One of the men noted that it was really incredible to have the whole carcass of such a creature with you. The warrior explained that his inventory was slightly larger than usual, although the situation seemed familiar to him. One of the specialists confirmed that the quality of the body was well preserved. The buyer offered a price of 3 million bodies per kilogram, specifying that he would not buy everything at once, but his offer was more advantageous than the guild's. Kaidi agreed with surprise. After the deal was made, Sumizu began preparing for work and called everyone to help. He asked the boy if he knew fire magic and confirmed that it was time to cut up the lizard. The hero inquired what exactly needed to be burned and received an explanation. To extract the metal, the insides had to be burned first. According to the dwarf's calculations, up to 500 kilograms of metal could be obtained from such a body. Sumizu was surprised by the boy's magical power and assumed that he had defeated the lizard alone, using at least B-level magic. He noted the speed and power of the attacks. Keed explained that he preferred to fight with a sword since he was acting alone. He added that he had a short staff that did not interfere in combat. The blacksmith admitted that he had never heard of such a style of fighting and was surprised by the length of the staff. In his opinion, 20 centimeters was too short. He asked what material it was made of. The guy replied that he simply bought it in a store in Ane and did not know its exact origin. Keed wondered if the staff's material affected the speed of casting spells and asked if it was possible to create a staff from the body of a metal lizard. Sumizu guessed that his current staff was probably made of an iron rod and copper skin. Materials suitable for beginners. He added that if he had the money, he could create a staff that would allow him to cast spells much faster. The blacksmith confirmed that it was possible to create a staff from lizard metal, but it would take time. He explained that the metal was very hard and required special processing. He also added that staffs and swords had different structures, so the approach to making them should be different. The warrior thanked the blacksmith for his help, and he advised him to contact Sumisa if he was really interested in making a staff. It turned out that she was the one who made the best quality staffs in the city. The guy thought about the fact that this girl was really capable of making a staff. Katie approached the girl with a request to make a staff from the metal lizard material, specifying that he wanted a shortened version with a high speed of magic activation. Sumisu was surprised by his request, calling it too complicated, and asked if he even understood how staffs were made. Keed asked Sumisu to teach him how to create staffs, citing her skill that her father had mentioned. The girl, surprised, agreed, deciding to explain everything. Sumisa began her explanation with the basics, explaining that the length of the staff affects the speed of magic. She emphasized that longer staffs allow spells to be cast faster. The girl showed a diagram of the staff, divided into parts: the core, the accelerating layer, and the outer shell. The higher the quality of the core, the faster the magic passes, and the density of the magic depends on the outer part. She explained that the magic density determines how much magic can be stored in the staff. If the density is exceeded, the magic begins to leak out. Improved materials increase the efficiency. Kaid proposed to create a short staff that would be as fast as a long one and could also be used as a sword. Sumisa, stunned by his idea, did not immediately understand his intention. He specified that he planned to use the metal lizard material for the shell and build a charging mechanism into the accelerating part. In exchange for constant recharging, he would receive high magic speed. Sumisa explained that a short staff with the chosen design would require as much mana as 3 mages would normally have and would be able to cast 100 spells. Kate thought about her words, noting that his mana reserves were 500 times higher than usual, and with the potion, 5,000 times higher. He confidently declared that he could use such a staff, and noted that this was the spirit of a true adventurer. The girl was amazed by his drive. Sumisa agreed to make the staff, adding that in his current configuration, Kaitai was in danger of quickly running out of mana. He promised to increase his maximum to avoid this. After finishing all the weapons-related business, K-88 decided to wait for 3 days until the work was finished by doing missions in Herrera. He took a new order. The hero found himself on the battlefield, fighting with many wolves. He actively used the shield and demonstrated combat readiness. Keed completed the mission to exterminate the red wolves, but noted that his magic speed was still insufficient. Despite this, he looked around the area with interest and enjoyed the scenery. The boy noticed that there were no trees in the area and wondered if this was related to the rare appearance of monsters near the city. Suddenly, his device detected a human presence, and he began to wonder who it could be. Analyzing the signals, he realized that 2 people were on duty at the entrance to one of the shelters. It became clear to him that in front of him was a bandit lair, although the place seemed too open. Kaid went to the guild to report the discovery. Branch Chief Herrera was surprised to hear about the secret base and wondered how they could have arrived in the city so quickly. He confirmed that he saw 2 guards at the entrance and indicated that he noticed a large hole that looked like the main entrance to the shelter. Kaut came to the conclusion that they were facing not just a gang of criminals, but a well-organized group. According to him, the presence of guards at the entrance indicates the scale of the organization, or that they are led by someone trained. Keed informed the guild leader about the discovery of the bandits' hideout, noting that he did not know their exact number, as he had decided to convey the information first. The leader promised a reward after confirming the veracity of the information, but the boy refused the reward. The guild leader asked to keep this a secret so as not to scare off possible allies of the bandits. He also said that a suppression squad would be formed, and Ked, as the discoverer, would most likely be included in it. The next day, Kaidi went to the city and asked Sumisa if the weapon was ready. The girl replied that the manufacturing date had not yet passed. He admitted that he had hoped to use the new weapon on the mission, but now he would have to make do with the old gear. He accepted the situation with a small smile. The boy noticed that the trees around the town had been cut down and asked if it was to protect against bandits. One of the locals explained that the trees were cut down to produce charcoal, which is needed to smelt metals. Tumisa explained that the mine coal was only suitable for heating, but not for high-quality smelting. The guy remembered that in his world, limestone and coke were used for this. He enthusiastically suggested using coke produced by burning coal as an alternative and shared this knowledge with Sumisa. Kaidi explained to Sumisa the difference between burning coal normally and creating coke. Noting that when air is restricted, the material does not turn to ash, he drew an analogy with charcoal, emphasizing that the fuel does not burn completely. Sumisa admitted that she doesn't understand fuel and is only focused on making staves. She suggested that Kaidi approach the fuel shop with an idea if he had a suggestion. The girl remarked that if Coyote could prove the effectiveness of his coke fuel, it could be considered valuable and even make him rich. These words made him think. Kaidi arrived at the fuel shop and asked if it belonged to Igni. After receiving confirmation, he explained that he came with an idea for a new fuel, on Sumi's advice. Ian asked what exactly Kade was proposing. The boy explained that the new fuel was made from coal and should have a higher heat output than charcoal. He also mentioned that it would help save the surrounding forest. Kaidi admitted that the shopkeeper doubted his idea. He asked for help in creating a new fuel, knowing that he would first have to prove the effectiveness of the development. Kaidi explained that he would pay all the expenses for the experiment, but if the technique was successful, he would charge a fee for its use. He noted that in this world, rights to new technologies are recognized, and therefore his proposal should be safe for the partner. The guy added that the method had not yet been fully developed and would not always be successful, but suggested trying. The seller agreed to the terms and expressed his willingness to cooperate. Cade thanked him. He was happy about this event. The guy noted that his task was not to develop fuel, but adventures. A night had passed since the report about the bandits. A suppression team was assembled in the guild. Keed greeted the other members. The blonde mage introduced himself as Magus and said that he would be leading the team to eliminate the enemy. He stated that he was a B-rank wind mage. The team gathered around the map and discussed the location of the enemy base, which was about 8 kilometers to the southwest. They estimated the enemy force at between 30 and 40. There were 7 people in the group, including K8A. Even though the mission was ranked E, the enemy had the advantage in numbers, so the members agreed to proceed with caution. The leader asked everyone to state their name, rank, and specialization. Two fighters, Zenshi and Valen, introduced themselves as D-rank and C-rank swordsmen, respectively. The rest of the group also introduced themselves. Hankus was an E-rank spearman, Ino was an E-rank swordsman, and Makoku was a D-rank archer. It was Katie's turn. The boy explained that he was an E-rank magic swordsman, meaning his job involved using both sword and magic. Kaide noticed that the other members were surprised by his ability to use magic on the move despite his rank. One of the group members asked him to demonstrate his abilities, apologizing for his lack of confidence. The guy admitted that he was not trying to attract attention, but as an adventurer, he could not refuse to show his strength if asked. He understood that assessing combat skills was necessary for the safety of the team. Coyote walked over to the training dummy, deciding that hiding his strength might be more dangerous if it resulted in other participants getting hurt. When he started the demonstration, some of the group watched him with doubt. His movement seemed inexperienced to some, and he was offered to use a potion and fight as in a real fight. The guy refused help and expressed his willingness. A rapid flurry of sword strikes startled the onlookers. He expected them to be satisfied by his display of swordsmanship. After that, he moved on to magic, causing a strike with the spell Stone Spear that exploded with a roar upon impact. Kairi unleashed a powerful spell that left a scorched line behind and shocked the other participants. Kairi remembered that he was asked to use magic twice, but Magus quickly stopped him, reminding him. Kairi asked if the performance was up to expectations, but the long-haired magi clarified that he had shown enough. The same magician immediately moved on to questions about protection and endurance in magic. Keed said he had become an adventurer less than a month ago, and that many things had happened since, adding that he could cast magic non-stop for 20 minutes without running out of mana and could heal minor wounds instantly. The squad leader praised Cade's strength and, with a hint of envy, asked him to lead the front line in the attack on the lair, noting a mage's help would be indispensable. Despite his nerves, the young man agreed to take the lead role and firmly said he was ready to act before the others. The group reached the forest, behind which lay the bandits' lair, and after a short discussion, Valen and Kaeda took the vanguard while Magus covered the rear. Keed nodded as Magus explained the plan. 4 members slipped around the back to block the rear entrance they'd found on reconnaissance. Immediately after, Keed cast Stone Spear, delivering a powerful blow. The defeated bandits lay motionless, and K-80 moved on immediately, one of them stunned by his speed, calling out that he was too fast, and the others only had time to follow his actions. Cade moved quickly, and the others were amazed at how nimbly he ran through the cave. Using the radar map to navigate, he prepared to assess which people he met were bandits. Kieti suddenly activated the spell Pressure Magic, covering the opponents with a wave of magic. The bandits were confused, realized they faced a strong opponent, and heard the order to suppress them. They reached a new part of the cave, breathing heavily after moving quickly. Kaidi was glad the path hadn't split, since that would have made reaching this point harder, but he knew it would get more difficult from here. A large stone door without a handle blocked their path. Kaid assumed it could only be opened from the inside by knocking. The barrier's mechanism was built that way. Kaid heard echoing voices and realized many people were behind the stone door. The space behind the barrier was too large for his radar to detect. Magus asked if Cade could use magic and offered to break down the door. After Cade agreed, Magus started the countdown, preparing for the invasion. As the door opened, K-80 charged forward to attack, and the bandits screamed and panicked, unsure who stood before them. Keed used his recognition skill to confirm that everyone inside was a bandit, then immediately cast Stone Spear and unleashed a barrage of magic on them. Magical wolves appeared in the cave, but Keed and his allies had already destroyed everything, and he watched calmly as it happened. With the mission complete, the whole group gathered at the cave entrance. Magus admitted Cade was too strong, which explained the unusually quick and easy victory. Kaid spotted a strange signal on the radar and prepared to collect trophies. He decided the situation was resolved and everything was fine. Katie's radar picked up 7 people and a child approaching, and the team suspected they might be kidnappers, so Magus ordered them captured alive and told Katie to focus on rescuing the child. A group of strangers arrived with a girl. One of them called out, announcing they were there. Coyote's team reacted and readied themselves for action. The squad struck the enemies at once, and during the skirmish Keed used pressure magic while the archer protected the hostage. Keed picked up the girl and found her unusually light, which made him suspect she was under forced hypnosis. Kaid's appraisal revealed the girl's name was Rhea, and she had no physical disabilities, but her race was unusual, not an ordinary elf. Keed noticed Rhea's status looked very different from usual. It no longer showed any mana amount, and the skill column listed external magic power and magic control at 17, far higher than his own stats. He wondered what the skill did and guessed Rhea could take another person's magic as her own if they had weak control. As he thought, the girl woke, asked who he was, and said she felt a strong magical energy from him. Keed was stunned by Rhea's power, realizing she could channel other people's low-control magic as if it were her own. It baffled him how such a unique girl could have been kidnapped in the first place. When Rhea woke, Keed asked if she was all right and gave his name. She was surprised by a strong magical presence from him, and calling him older brother, asked who he was. After learning the savior's name, Rhea happily confirmed she had been kidnapped. Keed handed her over to her allies and asked how things were going. A comrade reported the enemy had been neutralized, and casualties were minimal. Just as Keed reached to cut the ropes, Rhea smiled, said she could untie them herself, and jumped free, and the hero wondered whether she could have escaped without help. Rhea said cheerfully that she had no magic at all, so she couldn't have saved herself alone despite appearing cheerful. Keed, surprised, asked whether the girl had magical power because she had untied the ropes. Rhea smiled and explained that Keed had a lot of magic but weak control, so Rhea could use it easily. The boy looked confused, unsure if she had really used his magic without him noticing. Kade noticed his mana hadn't dropped, and the other mages admitted they couldn't make sense of the girl's words. One said the guild would find where she had been abducted, but Rhea refused to leave with him, and when asked why she fell silent, clearly embarrassed. Rhea pouted and complained that Uncle's magic was hard to use, then loudly said she wanted to be with Kade, was asked to stay since she had grown attached, and Kade reluctantly agreed while she happily clung to him. The young man found the girl surprisingly obedient, and he was still baffled by how she had untied the ropes and why she stayed so cheerful after being kidnapped, while Keed hoped the matter would finally be settled when they reached the guild. In the guild hall, the girl said the rules required them to care for the kidnapped children, but she paused to add something, and the other girls in the guild looked worried. When Casey was asked to temporarily look after the girl during the investigation, Rhea clung to him and cried that she did not want to be separated. The others, surprised, asked if he really did not know her, and he sheepishly confirmed that he did not. Kaid watched Rhea jump up and down, happily saying how fluffy everything was, and although he wondered why it had happened, seeing that she was just a child with no memories of the past made him decide not to treat her badly. Later he offered her the bed and slept on the floor himself. While the girls slept, Katie thought he would not be able to hunt monsters or go on trips in the coming days now that he had a child with him, and the man wanted to check on the progress of his coke production and his weapon. Keed woke to find Rhea lying beside him, staring at him. He wondered why she was there since they were supposed to be sleeping apart, and she calmly said she had just opened her eyes. Katie smiled tightly and said good morning, while the man could not hide his confusion. Rhea said happily that she woke up because she felt his magic stirring. The man still could not figure out who this girl really was. Keed stepped into the fuel shop and asked how the coke experiment was going. The owner Ian replied pleasantly but froze when he saw the girl, surprised that Keed seemed too young to be a father, and asking directly who she was. Keed said the girl had been kidnapped by bandits and seemed to have amnesia, so the guild was checking her past while he cared for her, and the shopkeeper sympathized and asked whether Keed had temporarily stopped adventuring. Rhea said she could fight confidently, and added that with Keed, she was even stronger than the Green Uncle. Coyote guessed Rhea was calling Magus Green Uncle because he wore green clothes. Magus confirmed he had temporarily stopped adventuring. Coyote remembered that when Rhea was last assessed, she had no fighting skills despite what she said. Kaid surveyed the coking oven Igni had eagerly brought him to, admiring the structure and openly showing surprise and interest in its design. Smoke rose from the stove and Keed looked worried. The master said it was part of the experimental phase and that a gas leak was unavoidable for now. Ian admitted welding mithril was difficult and said he had modified an abandoned furnace himself. If the current setup worked, he planned to hire a blacksmith to build a full, stable version. Keed was surprised to see the stove made of mithril, a rare material that in some games is nearly as valuable as orichalcum, atom, and tite, and not knowing mithril's market price he asked if it fit the current budget. But the craftsman was surprised to hear that mithril is practically everywhere in these parts. The girl told Kate excitedly that the stone they had found was mithril and that it appeared in other places, even in the wall. Kate tried to make sense of it, since he thought mithril shouldn't be found so often. Using his appraisal skill, the boy checked the stone and was surprised to find it was medium purity mithril, and the merchant explained that even less pure mithril still had value, and that about a third of all stones on Earth contained mithril ore. Kaidi admitted with an awkward smile that mithril seemed cheap in this world. The man he was talking to pointed out that his views were one-sided, even though he knew how to make coke. The warrior said it was good they had enough funds, but the gas leak still needed fixing, and Rhea looked surprised at the stove as smoke kept coming from it. Rhea said she would handle the leak and rushed to the stove, but Keed, alarmed, grabbed her to stop her, warned it was dangerous to go near the stove, and suggested they stay back, so Rhea pouted and agreed to act from a safe distance. Concentrating, the girl stretched her arms forward and began to use magic, sending a stream of energy toward the furnace that sealed the holes where gas was escaping as Igni watched in disbelief, and the boy held her in his arms, stunned by her power. Katie watched in amazement as Rhea happily announced she had stopped the gas leak. The man in the apron and Katie himself stared in shock at the stove, which was no longer leaking gas. The boy was confused, unsure if Rhea had used magic because someone of her level should not have that power, and Rhea cheerfully explained that she had melted the mithril with magic and used it to seal the crack. Keed tried to understand how she saw mithril, and when she answered yes, he decided he needed to teach her some common sense. To show it was no ordinary metal, he bent a piece of mithril. The bearded man observed that bending mithril this forcefully was rare, and that welding it from a distance was even rarer, and Rhea clapped, pleased with Kaid's reaction. A man in a white suit approached, introduced himself as Mia's, an accountant, greeted Cade, and said he had heard of him. Mia got straight to the point, saying that if coke were mass-produced, they would need to discuss technical compensation, and Kaid agreed that he was willing to hear proposals. Keed was surprised that talks about coke production had come this far, even though the process wasn't stable yet. The merchant said it was good news because coke was proving to be a very efficient fuel. The man said coke makes smelting microfrill 20 to 30 times more efficient than charcoal, expects to recover the cost of a furnace in 10 days, and wants to start mass production right away. Keed admitted he was new to this and that it was his first time getting a technical fee, and he had hoped for at least 10% of the profit, but the merchant offered him 50%, which he found very generous. Surprised by the large share, Kaidi first thought it was a scam but then accepted it as a fair offer, admitted his mistake and agreed, though he still felt 50% was too high. Once the deal closed, Kaid learned he could earn money in other cities by paying a commission, and the fast pace left him uneasy. When Rhea asked where they were going next, Keed, suddenly with nothing to do, asked if she had any wishes and decided not to bother the blacksmith until he finished removing the weapon's magic. She cheerfully said she wanted to go on an adventure and fight monsters, and he admired her fighting spirit but warned it could be dangerous. He told her to wait until she could protect herself with magic, and she showed the ornament in her hair, saying it was her talisman and that with Katie she would be safe. He was surprised to learn it was a magical protective amulet that could neutralize any attack and remained invisible to anyone with bad intentions. He wondered why she had such a powerful artifact, and when the girl asked to fight now, he asked her to stay close, realizing it explained her carefree attitude. A few minutes after leaving the guild, they entered the forest. Rhea quickly found the plant she needed, and the man said he had chosen the safest quest. Kayet used the analysis skill to identify the right herb. First, Kayet activated recognition to confirm he had the right plant. Using his analytical skills, the boy distinguished real Firo grass from similar species. One sample proved fake and it was Breva grass. Rhea came over and asked if he had found anything, but Katie said he was wrong. Holding up another grass sample, the girl asked cheerfully if it was suitable. The boy confirmed it was Fioro and praised her. The companion said she had one, but Keed said he would win by quantity. They kept collecting plants as Kaidi activated the analysis and quickly found suitable areas, using his abilities to gather grass and steadily increase the number of samples. After he announced the seventh, the girl accused him of being dishonest. Keed smiled and denied it, thought it a bit unfair but still counted it as a win, and noticed his companion had already used magic to gather several herbs before him. He suspected she could find Firo's location through analysis as he could, but she calmly said she could not, which surprised him and left him wondering how she could have done it. She was targeting the places where Kaidi had directed his magic during the analysis. He realized she was simply using his detection instead of doing her own analysis. Then he noticed she had gone quiet and looked puzzled. Rhea activated her magic. The stone projectiles around her burst into flames, and Keed mistook one for a stone needle. Worried, he asked what had happened since there were no monsters nearby. Rhea objected sharply and said she could feel them. A stone Rhea fired flew into the trees and hit its target. A wounded creature screamed in the forest. Seeing the red wolves approach surprised Keed, and he realized Rhea had sensed them from over 100 meters away. The girl said she could draw a special magical power from both monsters and KD-80 himself. KD-80 was surprised that Rhea saw him as a source of energy, just like the monsters. Rhea said her magic was self-directed and therefore precise. When Katie looked surprised, she joked that he was too careless to handle that kind of magic. Katie sent a stream of magic at the target, and Rhea caught it and redirected it with precise aim. Stone blades shot forward and struck the enemy. The attack hit the wolf pack, destroying them with a lightning strike. Rhea said happily that Katie's magic was much more powerful and faster than hers. Katie thanked her and they moved on. Rhea said ordinary people could not release magic all at once, but Keed was an exception, and he realized that if Rhea could control only one kind of magic, his ability was truly extraordinary. Rhea warned that if she tried to control Coyote's unstable magic, it would spiral out of control. The boy wondered whether his control was really that chaotic. Kide concluded that Rhea used precise, mage-like control while he fought like a swordsman who forced magic with strength, realizing her firepower was weaker, but his reserve of magical energy was vast. Deciding to cast powerful spells, he let Rhea redirect them with precision. Until they found her hometown, he planned to enjoy that fighting style, convinced their combination was invincible. A pack of wolves circled them, then suddenly charged. Rhea watched in alarm as the predators closed in. The girl warned them that many monsters were coming. Cade turned with a slight smile, but Rhea's serious look reminded him of the magic. Cade admitted he felt a surge of excitement, and Rhea happily matched his mood, both eager for the upcoming fight. Rhea said she had only used the magic Cade had emitted without realizing it, and Cade was surprised his mana level had not changed. The boy was stunned to learn she had used up all her excess power. Rhea said she could only control the flow of magic, not its source, so she could not use its full power. Keed reflected on her words and admitted he never really understood how his magic worked, realizing he used it unconsciously and didn't know the details. Keed asked if training in magic control could get him to the same level, and Rhea said it might be possible, but she did not think he had any real talent, comparing him to someone from a world without mana. Wondering why he could use magic without preparation, the boy suggested he might have a special magical gift. Rhea noted that even with a gift, one cannot cast spells without proper control. Rhea explained that KDE forces magic to work, as she did when she reshaped the mithril, and the boy realized he had been using the same brute force method to activate magic. Keed concluded the sources of his water and earth magic were in the environment. From that he realized he could use magic to raise the temperature enough to trigger spontaneous combustion by combining imagination with environmental conditions. Keed thanked Rhea for the meal she made. He was surprised the dish was salty because they hadn't used any seasoning. Rhea said she had simply taken salt from the ground. A new chapter title page appears, showing a girl standing before a spinning sword, titled I Decided to Think About It. Tayed and Rhea return to the guild carrying a mountain of trophies, ask the guild to confirm the task is complete, and offer to buy everything they collected, as the guild workers watch in surprise at the size of the loot. The guild member is shocked to learn they have collected over 4,000 fire herbs and defeated more than 300 red wolves, and Keed explains Rhea was also in the battle and is getting used to that reaction. A guild member approaches Cade and says she wants to talk about Rhea, surprising him while Rhea watches silently. The heroes enter the room to talk. Cade expects the conversation will be about Rhea's return to her hometown and thinks Rhea will have trouble opening up because they used to be close. Keed decides to ask the important question himself and asks whether Rhea's parents will come to pick her up. The guild girl apologizes and sadly says they cannot be found. Surprised, Keed asks again, and she confirms there is no trace of them anywhere. The girl said the bandits' routes showed none of the supposed towns were Rhea's hometown, and the captured bandits admitted they found Rhea in the forest, so Keed suggested her hometown might be much farther away. The girl admits it's theoretically possible, but unlikely. The guild has no records of any race with the same traits as Rhea. Keed tells Rhea to wait a moment and suggests she may have been abandoned because of her looks, but the guild girl denies it. The girl says she doesn't know the details, but was told Rhea wasn't abandoned. Cade notes Rhea has many mysterious traits. Recalling that he reported all of Rhea's details to the guild, including her hair ornament, abilities, and race listed as a special type of elf, he wonders if Rhea remembers anything despite her memory loss. Rhea said she was in a forest but felt no magical energy and added it was far away, probably not on this continent, and Keed found her answers too confident and reserved for a normal girl, which only made her seem more mysterious to him. The guild member admitted that finding a volunteer to care for Rhea would be difficult, and as they considered their options, Katie wondered if the girl might be much older than she appeared, perhaps even older than himself. Kate asked if anyone could take custody of Rhea, and was told that if no one agreed she would have to go to an orphanage, and Rhea looked at him with fear. Rhea said she didn't want to go to the orphanage and hurried to Keed, asking to stay with him. Keed, a guild member, gently asked if he could take her under his wing, though she knew it might be difficult for an adventurer. Katie thought it would usually be difficult, but he remembered Rhea had lost her memory and noted that her calmness came from finding someone with similar abilities who made her feel more confident. Doubt crept in, and he was not sure he could take her on his travels, because if he faced a powerful opponent and had to use all his magic, the girl who depended on his magic would be unable to defend herself. He realized he could not put her in danger, although he felt sympathy. Until he was sure she was safe, she would be a burden to him. He asked for time to think it over. The guild member agreed and said he could decide before moving to another city again. Rhea watched him quietly. Keed promised he would not leave Rhea alone, and she accepted with relief and joy. He wanted to say at least that before making his final decision. The next day, Keed woke to find Rhea brimming with enthusiasm. Rhea suggested going to the guild to fight tougher monsters and named several dangerous ones. The hero said he had other things to do and they could leave later, thinking Rhea probably wanted to prove her worth so he'd keep her, and he partly agreed. Samasa met them on the street, cheerfully saying the staff was ready. Rhea looked surprised to see Cade using the staff. Cade explained he was a magical swordsman. The girl, surprised to find Rhea beside him, asked who she was. Cade eagerly showed off the sword-shaped staff, named it Sorcerer's Blade, and was impressed by how it combined the qualities of a staff and a sword. Rhea was surprised to find the staff shared the same magical power, and Sumai said she made it that way at Katie's request, so though its shape was odd, it is one of her best works. Finding the staff's weight a perfect fit, Cade agreed to try using magic. Sumasa suggested they head to the training grounds, and the group went there. Concentrating, Cade held the staff as streams of mana began to flow from it. Sumasa was surprised by the magic's strength, and Cade noticed the staff was different from the previous one, as it literally sucked out magical energy. He decided to stop at 200 megapixels. Casting the stone spear spell, Katie unleashed a rocky spear that exploded with great force and tore the ground apart as Sumasa and Rhea watched in amazement. Sumasa gasped at the projectile's speed. Cade, stunned by the result, realized the staff's effectiveness was limited by the material change and thought he could still hit the target from a kilometer away. Sumasa asked after the demonstration how much magic he'd used, and Cade said that after accounting for mana drain it was about 100 megapixels, not enough to worry about in everyday situations. Surprised, Sumasa compared the mana volume to the combined power of 5 mages and wondered if Kide was truly human. Kide laughed it off, saying he was an ordinary human with slightly higher mana and asking Rhea to keep it secret. Kide thanked Sumisu for the staff he had created and said he was glad she had made it. The girl smiled and added that if he was pleased she had no objections. Sumasa told Kide that the fuel shop accountant was looking for him and wanted to talk to him after finishing his business there. Mias met Kide and reported the coke production equipment was ready, adding that about 10 machines were already running and mass production had begun. Mias said the coal miners learned of their plans and agreed to cooperate, adding that past worker shortages led him to ask the Miners Association for help. Kide was surprised by the Miners Association size. Maya confirmed that it was because of them production got started so quickly and suggested they go to the site together to check how the work was progressing. Dwarven workers were busy processing and hauling coal at the production site, while steam and smoke from the operating equipment rose above. Katie, Rhea, and Mayas arrived at the cock production area where the dwarves were working. Rhea was surprised at how many there were, and Katie explained they were workers from the Miners Association. Then an unknown man approached them and asked whether he was Katie. Introducing himself as Gainter, chairman of the Miners Association, the man said he had heard of Katie and was clearly impressed, which surprised Katie to learn he headed the association. Gainter thanked Kide for her help, said Rhea was making a good impression, and added that he wanted to express his gratitude before discussing the important topic. Gainter said a strange illness had appeared in the mine and kept workers from doing their jobs, noting that Kade, as a newcomer, might not know about it, and stressing that the illness was treatable though it interfered with work. Gainter said the symptoms were headaches and nausea, like a mild magical overload from eating wyvern meat, and Coyote suggested the cause could be toxic gas from the mine. Kide said he now understood the risks of eating wyvern meat. Rhea listened closely. Gainter added that, although there had been no deaths or other serious consequences, the miners could not keep working under those conditions. Kide asked how the miners coped with the disease. One worker said they had to stay away from the mine and work no more than 3 hours a day, resting the rest of the time. Because of this, business was failing and almost everyone was out of work. Coyote noted the illness required almost a full day of rest, said an evaluation could find its cause, and asked Gainter to investigate the illness to help improve coke production. Gainter approved the plan, saying the guild had posted a similar request but no one had succeeded and he hoped Cade could handle it, while Rhea asked if they were going to fight, and Cade replied their enemy this time was not monsters. Cade told Rhea to stay because the area might have toxic gas, and he expected her to argue but wouldn't risk her, so although she was upset they weren't going to fight, she agreed to stay. Cade asked Gainter about the area where most of the furry had gathered, and he said they abandoned it first because many people had died there, and it was the most dangerous area. Kaidi asked Rhea if by fluffy she meant magical power. Rhea said it was a bit different, but the same feeling came from someone nearby. Kate saw Miner's face go pale and used his appraisal ability to check his condition. He couldn't see what Rhea was feeling, but he suspected something was wrong. Analysis showed the miner was overloaded with magical energy, and Rhea confirmed she felt the magic, likely from the monsters. Kaidi began to understand the situation. Gainter asked Garnier, one of the workers, how he felt, and he admitted he was unwell because he'd just come back from the mine. Gainter warned Garnier not to push himself too hard and said Rhea was very talented for her age, comparing her to Cade. Gainter offered to take Rhea along on the investigation, saying the disease affected children less and they could retreat if danger arose. Trusting Rhea's assurance that everything would be okay, Kine agreed to take her with him, and she screamed with delight. Cade and Rhea hurried toward the mine, Rhea hovering beside him as he watched in surprise at how easily she flew while he ran. Knowing she had that magic, he thought she could retreat easily if danger came. Soon they reached the mine entrance, where a warning about Miner's disease stood nearby. Cade asked Rhea to report if she sensed any monsters. Rhea agreed and stepped forward cheerfully, ready to do her part. Rhea admitted the walls dulled her sense of magical creatures, but she promised to try. Cade realized his detection would be more effective in those conditions. Feeling something strange beneath his feet, he asked Rhea if she had noticed it. Rhea looked up and said she felt the magical energy growing stronger too. Rhea agreed the Fluffy was getting stronger underground and was surprised he hadn't noticed, and he admitted he couldn't tell without radar and suggested digging up the place, which Rhea happily agreed to. Kaidi began digging and soon his shovel struck something hard. Rhea immediately noticed the spot looked different from the surrounding rock, and the boy was puzzled, not knowing what he had hit. At the spot he had found, Cade suggested it might be an ancient building. Rhea agreed, saying the wall was probably magical, and even he could not destroy it. Cade chuckled and told Rhea to step aside, and his prodding only made him more eager to try using magic on the barrier. 10 minutes later, still using all his strength, he kept attacking the wall. Rhea, amazed, asked if he was even human, and he calmly confirmed that he was. He realized this was the first time he'd charged magic right in front of Rhea, then activated pressure magic and struck hard, but the wall stayed intact, which surprised him greatly. Just as he began to grasp how strong the barrier was, Rhea screamed to warn him, and the floor began to collapse. When the floor collapsed beneath them, Cade and Rhea began to fall into danger. Rhea screamed while Cade grabbed on to keep them both from falling. When her magic couldn't support their combined weight, Cade asked Rhea to let him go so he could handle his own landing, and she released him despite her anxiety. Falling, Kaidi used radar to gauge the distance to the ground, and chose recovery magic to survive the 15-meter fall. With only a few seconds left, he used his power to gather rocks around him to shield himself from falling debris and focused to endure the impact. After landing, Kade was unhurt and surprised by how well he had held up. Rhea soon ran over, worried about his condition as he stood up. Cade asked Rhea to light the dark underground space. Rhea happily cast a light spell, and the boy watched in amazement as she successfully lit the cavern around them. Kaidi scanned the vast underground chamber lit by magic, and was surprised by how large and empty it was, seeing nothing but high, smooth walls. Rhea replied she didn't know the details but felt a strong, soft magical presence, and Cade guessed they were inside an ancient building. After Rhea confirmed it, Cade concluded this was the source of the magical energy, and delighted by the discovery, decided they should return to report it. K-88 checked the height and asked if Rhea could fly out, but she said she could not fly that high, so he wondered how they would get back out. Cade wondered how Rhea's flight worked, assuming she used magic and air pressure to create lift, and was surprised that her flying was limited in height. Kaidi, hoping for a solution, asked if he could use the same magic to lift them together. Rhea panicked and screamed that he could not control the flight and might kill her on the way. Cade suggested finding another way out of the mysterious room, and to avoid moving blindly, he asked Rhea which direction the fluffy magical energy seemed stronger. Rhea pointed confidently, and they moved in the opposite direction. As they moved on, Cade reminded everyone their goal was only to investigate and told Rhea to watch for nearby monsters, and Rhea eagerly said she wanted to fight but quickly corrected herself when she realized she had mistaken Keed for a big monster, which annoyed him. After a while, they ended up back near the debris from the ceiling. Coyote realized they had walked in a circle and wondered whether the space was ring-shaped. KD looked around the room and said it was nothing but walls. Rhea agreed and pointed out that one wall felt a bit off compared to the others. Keed and Rhea approached a strange section of wall that seemed resistant to magic, and Keed realized it was a door disguised as a normal wall, while noting his radar could not detect what lay beyond the barrier, making it especially suspicious. Keed said the door could be opened because he'd seen old signs of use, but warned Rhea there might be danger behind it and urged them to be careful before they went any further. As the massive door opened, Kaidi and Rhea watched. The boy pressed his hand to his forehead, and Rhea stared ahead as strange creatures began to appear in the darkness. Mechanical monsters with sharp limbs burst out from the depths of the hall. Keed immediately raised a shield over Rhea and warned that they were monsters. A monster suddenly fell, and Keed suspected Rhea had caused it, but she quickly pushed aside the speculation and focused on the fight. With his magic sword, he activated the spell and charged forward to destroy the enemies and protect his companion. After the fight, Keed checked on Rhea to make sure she was unharmed. Rhea said he was the one who stopped the needles, but Keed looked puzzled. Rhea said the monster's magic faded as it got closer to Keed, and she seemed surprised. Keed noticed the monsters were acting strangely and said they looked like magical tools. Rhea agreed, adding their shapes looked odd too. The girl muttered that Katie was strange as well, and he immediately asked if she had said anything. Coyote's appraisal skill showed the enemies were magical tools made to guard, one called Flying Eye, and a magic-resistant door labeled Magic Isolation Door Low Level, and all such devices in this world were called artifacts. The heroes concluded the building was an ancient ruin, and Keed noted they were here illegally, and that his radar could not detect what lay behind the door. The boy wondered what monsters might be hiding behind the barrier and asked whether they should turn back, but Rhea refused, saying they would not be able to return home if they were treated. The boys went through all the rooms and, given how many there were, managed to check 8 new doors. Each of these doors hid an empty room where utter hopelessness ruled. They hovered among the guards, but there was no path to the source of magical energy or to an exit from the tangled labyrinth, so Keed realized the place was abandoned and they decided to move on. Continuing on, they noticed a rare door with a posted sign warning that unauthorized persons would be disqualified. The warning made the boy realize there were even greater dangers beyond the door. He drank a potion of courage, while Rhea said it did not matter what monsters awaited since they would all die anyway. The goal was not to fight the monsters, but to find a way out, and they would likely need magic to escape. Keed asked the girl to be careful, and she agreed. As soon as they entered, a strike came from below, but the man dodged. It was unexpected, so he assumed it was another guard, and he protected both himself and the girl. Confused, the young man could not hit him because he saw the needles falling as they flew. Rio recognized other enemies among them, and the young man watched in fear, not understanding what was happening. Many monsters no longer hid from him, and they were guards of a different color, including mechanical wolves and porers. Among them was a huge flying snake, whose size inspired fear. The girl felt Keed's disdain, although Keed understood it was not the main problem. Sharp spikes were waiting, and they began to attack. The man shouted for Rhea to run, and he immediately fled, dodging the attacks. The girl said she needed a stone spear, and he understood. Stopping, she attacked the enemies with it. When the fog cleared, she saw the enemies were unharmed and alive. The girl was stunned, and Keed could not understand why his magic had no effect on them. The enemies kept up, and a mechanical wolf began pursuing him while the girl warned him about it. Doubting they were real robots, the young man decided to use his magic sword because they moved too fast and silently. Striking his metal body, Keed released magic. The wolf proved very strong, but Fastly was not an easy opponent and stood firm, keeping up his attack. He used all his strength to cut the mechanical wolf's body. It became clear his sword could still cut the monsters, but magic had no effect on them, and their metal was unknown, so Kahidi suspected a catch and decided to conduct an assessment. He realized he had a Category 2 infantry anti-magic steel, crystallized with magic particles that were not susceptible to any magical influence. All the factors indicate they have complete resistance to magic, and that resistance likely applies to all magical tools in this room. Rhea realized they needed more stone spears to destroy the multicolored guardians raining shells on them, so she suggested it to him, and he liked the plan very much. He could finally focus on the wolves, but the biggest problem remained the huge snake, which kept them from dealing with the smaller monsters. She smashed everything in her path with her tail, but the men managed to dodge. One man could not understand why the snake was so strong and ignored the metal tools meant to guard and destroy everything nearby. The girl called to the boy, warning him that the snake was preparing a powerful attack, but he was focused on the terrible monster as a huge sphere began forming in its mouth, ready to deliver a devastating blow. Cade realized with dread that the situation was getting critical. He told Rhea to retreat to the stairs, and she obeyed. They were only a few steps from the door that could save them from the imminent attack. A broken door to the stairs blocked their way, smashed by the same monster. Other monsters, like obedient servants, closed in slowly, ready to attack. He realized it was hopeless, and the only option was to fight. He needed a brilliant plan to defeat the snake since his sword could never reach it, so Cade asked Rhea if her magic could knock it off its feet, but she said it was impossible because the snake was too strong. The girl suddenly noticed the monster's wings and told the boy her idea that destroying them would make the snake land so they could use a fireball on it. Realizing this could be their chance, he agreed to the plan, but he had to make a ball that would hit the target. Using her magic, the girl conjured a huge sphere of fire and said this should be enough. The kids focused and aimed the fireball they had created at the snake. She wasn't so simple. Seeing the approaching fire, she flapped her wings, and Rhea immediately realized it would not be easy. A powerful explosion could have destroyed everything in its path, but when the fire died down, the snake was unharmed. He was disappointed, but realized his efforts had been enough even though they led nowhere. Then a new idea came to him. Kite asked Rhea if she could control the fireball by herself, but she said it was impossible because it contained too much magical energy. That left Kite to handle it alone, and without precise control, he could not hit the hidden wings. He tried to calculate how much extra energy it would take to destroy them. Rhea focused and said it would require boosting the power 20-fold. He immediately told her to do it while he distracted the monsters to keep them from getting close to her. The girl started shaping another fireball, and the boy, summoning all his courage and determination, stood to defend her, knowing their lives depended on working together. He could still gather the magical power needed for the spell, but all the magical artifacts except the snake were destroyed. The floor under his feet was already starting to cave in, but Keed still managed to dodge her attacks, and if he kept it up they might have made it, while Rhea supported him as best she could, though he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something would go wrong, and then there was a crash. Stones started falling, and he stared up at the ceiling in surprise while the girl, not knowing what had frightened him, also looked up and saw a huge crack spreading across the ceiling, about to collapse. He saw the snake destroy the wall, causing the ceiling to collapse and leaving everything unsupported. The boy suddenly realized he could end up buried alive, so he asked the girl if 10 fireballs would stop the snake, and she said 10 would hardly work but doubling them might, yet Kia knew they did not have enough time. The snake kept attacking and destroying everything in its path, but he somehow managed to protect both himself and Rhea. He asked how Rhea was feeling, and she said she was fine, though something else was bothering her. The ceiling then cracked and collapsed on them, and huge stones flew toward them. Panicking, she asked what to do, and Keed told her not to stay where they were but to run. Then he signaled for her to hold on, took her in one arm and pulled her close, ready to run. With the situation as it was, they couldn't miss their chance and rushed to the far end of the room to find another way while the snake stayed alert and saw them start to run. In that moment, as they hurried, he realized in horror that he hadn't found any intersections and that a perfectly straight corridor stretched out before him. Despair filled his eyes. As he prayed, there was a ladder below. When they finally reached it, they found a dead end and realized they were in a hopeless situation as danger crept up, ready to strike. The snake poised to strike again, and Kaid knew it was a sign of trouble. The ceiling had stopped collapsing, but if the enemy kept attacking, they could be buried alive, so he forced himself to hurry, knowing he had to find a way to buy time to prepare the spell. Thoughts of going back to the stairs through the destroyed door flashed through his head, and he considered moving all the stones into his inventory, but knew he would have to dodge the snake's attacks, which was extremely risky and would determine their fate. The young man took a defensive stance, flooded with anxiety, and knew he had to come up with a plan fast because both his life and Rhea's, who stood behind him holding back tears, were at stake. Suddenly she asked him to hand over the fireball, and he did not immediately understand her intention, so Keed asked whether she had a plan since she had earlier said she could not control that magic. Rhea said she was willing to try even then, and he realized she also lacked a clear plan. With no other choice, he agreed and handed her the ball. She tried hard to control it, but it was difficult and tension showed on her face. Using her magic, she neutralized any attacks aimed at them, and the hairpin began absorbing everything that came its way. Kaid had suspected as much. The situation was too risky, and he had to stop her immediately, so he tried to tell her his concerns, but she only said his name. The girl smiled and said adventures were fun for her, but her smile felt more like an attempt to ease the tension than genuine amusement. It puzzled him that she suddenly showed such courage, which he saw as a display of bravery. She had said it to keep Keed from bothering her. Still, he fully supported the girl and agreed with her decision. Screaming at the top of her lungs, she struck at the snake, and with the ball almost ready, she had to attack because the enemy was closing fast. The attack landed and the snake fell to the ground. Seizing the moment, the young man rushed in while it was weak and jumped to strike. Despite the difficulty, he did his best because Rhea gave him the chance. Kai yanked his sword from its sheath and put all his strength into the strike against the monster, determined not to miss this chance. After cutting the monster's body, he realized it was over, and the wounded creature lay on the ground. Worn out by the effort, he looked spent. Remembering the girl, he turned to her, and she ran up and asked whether he had managed to cope. The young man said he had apparently succeeded and asked how she was feeling. Kaid asked if she still felt careless, and the girl said she couldn't tell because the room was still a mess. She hoped everything would calm in a week and was glad they had managed. It was time for them to leave this place. There was no way out, but if they cleared the rubble, they might be able to get out through the remains of the ceiling. Exhausted, they collapsed to the ground to rest for a moment, and he noticed the girl's hairpin. Hoping the magic hadn't gotten out of control, he asked if she'd really put them both in danger, and Ryu said the magic had gotten out of control, but her hairpin stopped it. Kaida thought that was extremely reckless. She was relieved it had ended well and curious about what might happen next. The man figured they should hope for no more adventures, because if everyone acted like that, his days would be numbered. She smiled, agreed with him, and asked if he would take her along next time. This incident showed the girl can stand up for herself and use her magic hairpin for protection when needed. Cade wasn't going to stop anyone from enjoying their adventures, not even a little girl, and he thought his company was more interesting than being alone, so he told her it would be more exciting that way. Smiling, he extended his hand to her and said they would travel as friends from now on. Hearing this, the girl was overjoyed and ran to him, hugging him tightly. When the guys returned, Keed told them about magical artifacts he found in the dungeons while researching the miners, and about the disease. The girls listened with their mouths open, amazed and unable to understand how this was possible, and the guy explained it was called a magic eye, meaning it was equal to an E-rank monster, while the second artifact, the blue magic eye, was D-rank. The girl asked whether the blue metal wolf he had defeated and brought to rank B was equal. She wondered whether he had really defeated them. Kitty confirmed it and showed the girls another monster, and they stared at him with horror and confusion. The winged snake was the same, and the girls could not tell what kind of wings it had, while the man had no idea either. These artifacts marked their victory, and the largest likely became the main cause of a disease that eventually disappeared from the mines. Hearing this, the girls asked nervously whether Ryachin had taken part, noted that the guys finished the task in half a day while other adventurers could not, and expressed sincere gratitude for the work. Regarding the large artifact, the girl had not seen anything like it in years, and when she explored the ruins at night, she could recall every relic, so if she knew nothing about it, the guild knew even less. Surprised that the guild had no information about the artifact, Keed used his skills to evaluate it himself. Snake number 1 was the prototype medium annihilation cannon, and before returning, the young man checked the ruins twice and discovered the site was abandoned because the snake had gone out of control. If they learn he knows about the snake, he'll be in trouble, so he should stay quiet about it. Watching the artifact, the girl realized it was enormous and asked whether it was the strongest. Kaid confirmed it, saying the snake was taking out metal wolves left and right with its tail. Kaid himself destroyed about 30, but the monster probably took out many more. Amazed, she realized that if he really fought that many strong metal wolves, he must be equal to an A-rank adventurer. Assuming the artifact was a rank, Keed was impressed and at a loss for words, and as the discussion continued, they seemed likely to classify him as a B-rank adventurer, because he apparently needed leadership skills and B-rank was the highest he could get for now. Kaid felt he had achieved something significant in his life, and for the world. They approached Gainther and said they wanted to talk about Miner's disease, but they had already solved the problem 3 days earlier. Surprised, he turned and asked how they had finished the investigation and fixed the problem so quickly. When the young man finished his report, the discussion shifted to Coke. They were focused on stopping technology leaks and ramping up production. The kingdom that hosted his base planned to start selling and had already paid the technical fees. Kaid believed this revolutionary technology could transform the country. A sudden realization hit him, and he was horrified to discover it was too ambitious. The boy expected to join the kingdom's negotiations and focus on growing the business in the capital, but he handed over part of the profits and transferred all responsibilities to the Coal Miners Association. As an adventurer, K-Day had not yet finished his journey. The week flew by and the negotiations with the Coal Miners Association were very successful. When the young man told the guild he was officially accepting Ria onto the team, she got a guild card and he earned achievements for being the fastest and youngest adventurer to reach B rank, but compared to national-level stories, this was still nothing special. Still deep in thought, the young man remembered something and turned to the girl to start talking about her hairpin. As they left the ruins, he noticed the decoration that had been black as resin was now colorful, and Ria explained this was because his discharged magic had recharged the hairpin. The girl herself would have taken 30 years to charge, but this time she absorbed the energy in just 2 days. The young man was stunned and realized this indicated his nuclear source of mana. He grew curious about what would happen if he directed a concentrated stream of his magical energy at the hairpin, assuming the charging would speed up. The girl warned him that such a thoughtless move would only break the hairpin. At that moment, a girl approached them and apologized for the delay. The Iron Lizard's magical power had been removed, she reported, and now with the right equipment they could process metal anywhere in the world. The man thanked her sincerely and asked Ryu if she wanted extra armor, but she shook her head and said she did not need heavy protection. The girl asked curiously if they were going to another city, and K-80 replied thoughtfully that they had no specific plan and would most likely keep going, hoping she would lead them to new adventures. A sudden alarm made the young man immediately throw himself between the girls and the looming danger, acting as a human shield. Ryachin watched with caution and apprehension, and Sumisa, her voice full of bewilderment, asked why he was so cautious. The man, horror frozen in his eyes and sweat on his cheek, explained that something had disappeared. Approaching Ryu, he asked about the phenomenon, and they found the magical background had vanished 100 kilometers away. Keed could not locate the source of the massive magical overload, but he felt its echoes and knew it had to be magic of incredible power. He knew for certain that no one in the world could create a spell of that magnitude. It felt like an ancient artifact, a flying snake, had suddenly been cut off from its power source. Keed was certain the source of the anomaly lay behind that mountain. He asked Sumisa of Vat about settlements within 100 kilometers, and she told him about Ordian, a city at the foot of a dormant volcano, warning that the route runs through a labyrinth teeming with brang monsters and asking if he wanted to go, and the young man replied with clear enthusiasm that they would definitely go there. She felt nervous and excited at the same time and knew he would do it. He was a true adventurer, always seeking new experiences. As they walked, Keed asked Rai if she was okay, and Rai said yes, not at all tired from the long walk but rather overcome by boredom. She had no side effects from constantly using gravity, probably because she used Coyote's spent magic. Her flight speed was limited, but if he slowed down she could fly at 70% of his speed, so they could reach Ordian in just 10 minutes. Suddenly she spotted monsters, blocking their path ahead. She eagerly offered to handle them, but Kaid avoided fighting because he wanted to reach the city quickly, and there was nothing to do when crab monsters appeared on their path, many of them. The man saw them, wanted to destroy them, and looked quite happy, so when it was time for a warm-up, Ryu heard this, felt very happy, and they began to attack to clear the path of monsters. Keed told her to attack but not kill them, and she agreed, curiously asking why. The man was surprised she had missed the obvious and said the crabs looked too good to waste by just killing them all. Ria had never seen such monsters and knew nothing about them, so she was surprised they could be edible. The young man thought about her words, deciding their crab-like appearance did not prove they were edible, and he decided to act on her assessment. He assessed them, and according to her results, they were 4 clawed crabs with 1,200 units of health, 147 units of strength, and 59 units of agility, and they were edible. Kaid was glad he could taste them, while the girl noticed there were monsters there too, and the young man asked who it was this time. Huge brown cockroaches that, to my surprise, were edible, but Coyote was disgusted and frightened when he saw them. They had to run away quickly, and Ria, not understanding, asked why since the cockroaches looked weak, and the man said they simply spoiled his appetite. They followed the plan and managed to get away from the cockroaches, while a young man held a girl in his arms who nearly threw up from the violent shaking. They arrived in Ordian, and a man approached, saying it was unusual to travel with a child on such dangerous, monster-filled roads. He asked if they were okay, and Ryu said the monsters were weak. The stranger said they were D-rank monsters and didn't think they were that weak. Spotting the sword in Coyote's hand, he judged from the weapon that Coyote was quite strong. Not only master blacksmiths and adventurers recognized his Witcher sword as an unusual weapon, The young man said they could handle such monsters as easily as cockroaches and grew curious. He wanted to know why so many monsters had appeared near the city. A stranger said this city is surrounded by 4 forests where many monsters live. Recently, monsters began escaping from one forest and tried to move into the nearby forests. Coyote felt it strongly and realized that all the monsters they met were moving in the same direction. He asked if the man knew why they were migrating, and the young man admitted he did not know much, but rumors said the adventurers' guilds should have reliable information, and because they had not sent a high-level team to investigate, he figured the problem was not widespread. Keed was convinced important information was being deliberately withheld from them. Recalling how the guilds hid details about bandit hideouts, he suspected the same was happening here. The ground suddenly trembled during their conversation, and Rhea became frightened. She grabbed him, afraid, and asked what was happening, and Keed reassured her it was just an earthquake, common near volcanoes. A strange sulfurous smell made the young man uneasy and planted a seed of doubt, while the stranger said earthquakes had been happening more often lately, though locals considered them ordinary. Calling it one of the city's highlights, he greeted them and opened the gates. Inside, Keed and Rhea looked around in amazement at a city of ancient ruins and hot springs, a beautiful mix of history and nature. After checking into the hotel, the young man was annoyed to find the nightly rate was 10 times higher than in Herrera. Inside, he looked over the furnishings and realized what he was paying for. It had 3 rooms and even a kitchen. The boy asked Ryu if she could cook crabs with magic. He was eager to try it, and she agreed happily. An earthquake hit again while they were cooking, so Katie told the girl to step away from the pots, and he was glad the girl was used to levitating. Soon a sumptuous dinner was ready. They sat at the table, and Ryu suggested they start eating right away. He was the first to try it and found it delicious, no different from a regular crab, and when the girl saw his happy face, she wanted a piece too. Her eyes instantly lit up with delight. The dish was so delicious, and the man asked if that was true. He warned her not to eat it all because they would need something for breakfast, and he planned to hide the dinner leftovers in the inventory, and Rio obediently agreed, but soon after her hearty dinner, she began to feel sleepy. Rhea fell asleep at the table, and Kitty had no idea how old she was. Seeing her as an ordinary child, he decided it was time to sleep. He needed to find out why the magical background dropped sharply when they were near Herrera, but first he needed to relax and get a good rest. The hotel still had an open-air bath, and because fuel shortages in the cities he'd visited had left him unable to wash properly, he had been using only a simple water bag and now needed to take the chance while Rai slept. Partly submerged, he felt warmth spread through his body. When he looked around, he saw no bottle of shampoo, but he was not surprised because plain water had already washed the dirt from his clothes and body. This trait may have come from the influence of a mysterious artifact. Destroying this incredibly powerful object would be catastrophic. As the young man was about to leave the water, the ground suddenly shook with powerful tremors, and he assumed it was an earthquake. Rhea's heartbreaking scream came with it. The young man thought something was wrong and assumed the girl had been frightened by the shaking and had forgotten she could hover, though he remembered she lost that ability while sleeping. Hurried footsteps came from behind the door, so he knew Ryu was rushing toward him. The door swung open and a tearful girl ran straight at him, and he, realizing she would see him without clothes, screamed and begged her to stop. Rhea was already asleep, and Coyote understood why it was so quiet, so he had to get to the guild right away and the girl must not wake. Praying fervently, he hoped nature would not unleash another cataclysm. Soon he headed to the Ordian Adventurers Guild branch. Eager to learn the task details, the young man asked the girl and began investigating the artifact, specifically the sudden loss of massive magical energy, a feeling he had experienced in Herrera, and the only link to this case being his probe into why monsters were migrating. So not sure how much the guild knew about the artifact, Kai decided not to mention it and only told the worker he planned to explore the forest while asking if the guild knew about the situation. The young man said he wanted to find out what the guild already knew so he would not bring back information they had, and the girl said she understood, apologized, and added that she knew nothing about the forest. Greatly surprised by what he heard, he glanced at her clothes and saw the intern's badge. Kite paused to decide whether she was telling the truth. He felt she wasn't lying. Even if the rumors are true, they may have hidden information from ordinary employees. Other employees he questioned said they knew nothing about the matter. The young man silently apologized to the girl, aware he might need to pressure her. Again, he stressed that he would investigate the disappearance of a vast magical force. Just as he was about to share his suspicions about the artifact, another girl interrupted and told him to stop. She asked him to follow her. The girl needed to know how much he knew. When the stranger asked how much he knew about the artifacts, the matter struck him as tied to the artifact, and the stranger looked like a high-ranking official, so Kaidi hesitated to reveal everything. He then explained that he had once felt a strange sensation, and a friend versed in magic had said it came from the sudden loss of a vast magical power, which convinced him such power could only come from an artifact. Relieved the information hadn't leaked, the girl asked her friend's name, and the guy replied that it was Ria. Hearing the girl's name, she immediately asked if he was keyed, and the surprised man said yes while wondering whether he should have mentioned Ria and how she knew their names. The girl was certain they were the rookie adventurers recently mentioned in the report, known for their extraordinary strength. Few adventurers could make the trip from Herrera to Ordian in a day. The boys took only 3.5 hours, so they were recognized. Still, word of what happened spread astonishingly fast, and in a world without phones, Kaid assumed the message was carried by magic. This organization was a force he did not want to cross, so the young man asked whether information about the artifact was hidden, and the girl said only certain guild members knew and planned to make the discovery public, but someone had strongly advised delaying it. The young man was surprised to learn the information had been withheld by a third party, and he concluded the guild was powerful, and anyone who could forbid the guild anything was likely a feudal lord. When the young man asked whether permission was always needed to disclose information, she said it was not a strict rule, but in some situations where haste is inappropriate, you must act the same way. He realized it was not an emergency, and the girl confirmed his guess, saying the culprits had already been caught and punished. Cade was surprised to hear the problem was already solved, but he believed it was not, and she suggested an independent investigation. She then asked that her name be mentioned and that it be stated he was there because of Lasha. He agreed, and the girl promised to help him if he needed any information, but he could no longer ask her for anything. In the end, Keed found nothing significant and settled for it for now because he was sure third parties were deliberately hiding information. The girl said the criminals had shut down the artifact, but the monsters were still evacuating, so it needed to be destroyed rather than just turned off, and he thought that finding his remains might provide more information. Clearly excited, the girl asked if they would go fight monsters today, and the young man said yes. Reminding them they were in the forest, he asked where the magic had gone. Today they would focus less on hunting monsters and more on finding traces of the artifact. He told her to warn him if she sensed a monster approaching or an unusual surge of magical energy, and Ryu agreed at once. The girl noted it would be a little harder to sense magic with a faulty instrument, and he laughed because detecting an artifact that had lost its magic would be extremely hard for her and simply impossible for an ordinary person. Kaid asked if Ryu knew which direction the destroyed artifact should be, and Ryu looked around and admitted she had no idea. Many powerful sources of magical energy ringed the perimeter, so the young man decided they would search the entire area. Immediately they put their plan into action, defending the surrounding area from the attacking monsters and destroying them. He realized they all needed to be looted, then heard strange sounds that told him the girl was fighting off a whole horde of monsters. Keed grew frustrated because she was destroying them faster than he could pick up the carcasses for storage, forcing him to slow down and making the work inefficient. The man decided to try to speed up the work using magic, for example by drawing corpses with supernatural power. A sudden noise made everything around him pull toward him. He had no time to do anything. Keed asked in surprise what he was doing, and her explanation reminded him of his carelessness and his magical control, making him wonder if Ryu could use magic to pull the dead monsters to him so he could add them to his inventory faster, but they were too heavy for Keed. Knowing he could move faster to collect them, Rhea asked why he didn't use speed magic. Surprised, Keta had never heard of this and thought it was the same magic she used to move, and it turned out to be simple. She only needed to saturate her body with mana to become stronger and faster, so she decided to try. Her only request was not to accelerate toward it and to take precautions, though for safety, a slight acceleration might be worth trying. After using speed magic and casting an acceleration spell, the young man barely moved away from Ryu and stopped, surprised that he had used too little mana, and decided to try again. This time it sped up so much that clouds of smoke rose and a gust lifted Rhea's hair, leaving her staring at him in shock while he stood equally bewildered and did not understand what had happened. Traveling so fast he couldn't stop, he crashed into a tree and split its trunk in half, and he found the magic rather inconvenient. Worried, the girl ran up to him and asked if he was all right, and Kaidi said he was fine and wondered why he was unharmed, while Ryu realized it was because of his clothes, though Kaidi hadn't noticed. He remembered his clothes could boost defense by consuming mana, but he wasn't sure if that protection matched the rank armor made of Gower Dawn leather. Keed had an idea and asked Rhea how the armor activated when it touched a tree, and after a moment she said, surprised, that the magic always worked, and he was amazed that the armor constantly absorbed the mana he released, which Rhea confirmed by adding that the armor grew with him. Stunned, he realized the defense was no match for Gordon's armor because the wearer was just an ordinary swordsman, and that his clothes were actually monstrous armor that grew stronger in proportion to his mana. Rhea couldn't understand how he didn't know about it, and he concluded that even people who wore those clothes weren't aware the ability existed. Everything fell into place, and Keed asked her, eager to know if he could still master acceleration magic. Rhea told him to keep practicing. He decided they would train together by killing monsters, and the girl was delighted. Determined to master the magic of acceleration, he tried repeatedly, crashing into trees and losing control of his body each time, and he kept training despite the failures. On the verge of exhaustion, he remained determined to succeed. The girl watching his persistence felt deeply frightened and sensed that something was wrong. Kid had asked where the nearest monster was, and after the girl gave him directions, immediately rushed off that way. It became clear to him that constantly accelerating with magic would make him crash before he could get his bearings. Magic must be turned on and off instantly. The nearby monster sensed the approaching danger and grew wary. Suddenly, the young man cut through the air between the trees, swiftly closing the gap, and the monster froze, seized with horror. Keed threw the beast aside with one blow, its head dropping lifeless as it froze. Then he asked Rhea if he had mastered the magic, and she said his movements were strange. But he said it was fine and that the important thing was he had learned to use it, so Keed decided to continue training while Rhea suddenly became interested in something. They suddenly felt a powerful, strange magical energy nearby, and curiosity drove them to find its source. Soon they found majestic magic circles carved into the ground. It looked like the ancient ruins of Hira. No magic could affect the object. The girl couldn't hide her delight when she saw the circles. Kaid thought it over, suspected something important lay beneath them, and praised her insight. After the boys told Laja everything, she asked about their discoveries. Ryu dismissed it as boring, and the young man urged her to be patient and let him explain, describing a mysterious entrance 12 kilometers southwest of them, sealed by a lid-like object. Descending into the dungeon, they found ruins scarred by time and destruction. Burn damage covered everything, charred remnants of former grandeur. Scrap metal dominated the debris and rubbish and had no value. Visibly curious, the young woman asked if that meant something valuable had been stored there, and Kaid confirmed while pointing to the pedestal-like artifact. A massive, round artifact sat in the center of the room. The young man believed he was causing the strange phenomenon. Fragments of a large magic stone lay nearby, and Kai decided it had once been set on a pedestal. Examining the pedestal revealed it was part of a subsystem of a complex device. No one knew anything else about the device, but he concluded this place was an auxiliary facility for a larger system. The destruction of a large magical stone seemed to cause a strange phenomenon, and Lassio was shocked and fell into deep thought when he learned of it. Even if the girl knew something about the place, the man doubted she would want to tell them, and she seemed to have no idea about the auxiliary object. After a moment of thought, she said she wanted to ask about something. He remembered the man's words, that the underground ruins had once been an auxiliary structure. Laja suggested that Keed and Ryu know this thanks to their research skills. Both of them had those abilities, and she was right. The man was surprised she could infer so much from a few phrases because no one was supposed to know about his analytical skills, and she added she would not force them to reveal all the details. Laja wanted as much information as possible about the adventurer's contingency capabilities. Because they discovered the miner's disease so quickly, she suspected someone in their group had strong analytical skills and was hiding that ability. Rice, the onlooker, was very surprised, and Kaid was a little worried she might misuse the information, but he still admitted Lasha was quite witty. The young man chose to be frank and trust the girl, and to tell her the truth about his unique skills. Laja listened with approval and said she would discuss the details of the route to the ruins with him later, but he did not immediately understand what she meant. Earlier, she said that only certain venturers and guild members knew about the current issues, but she believed these people should know too. Unable to reveal all her cards without approval from the higher-ups, the girl asked them to be patient and not to pin too much hope on her. Anicap, feeling nervous, thanked her and realized that by opening up he had earned her trust. The real problem was the hidden information, and he could only hope higher management would let him share this knowledge with him, but before that he would have to explore where the main system might be located, the Ordian labyrinth. The next day, while heading to his business, Kaid asked Rhea whether she was all right and whether she had hit her head during the night. Rhea said she was fine and admitted she secretly wished for a slightly higher bed, though that would be hard to do while she slept. Hyde could not understand how difficult it was for her, since for him it was completely impossible. Then another earthquake struck. Gently stroking her head, the young man asked whether she was all right, and she reassured him that she was fine and had already gotten a little used to it, which made him incredibly happy. The girl asked where they were going today, and Kaid said they were heading to the guild to explore the labyrinth, when a girl and a guy called out and asked what had happened, and the girl said she was a guild employee and invited them inside to talk. According to the girl, the men were nominated in response to a request from archaeologist Fiona San for cooperation, assistance, and help in studying recently discovered ancient ruins, and the young man did not understand and asked Ryu whether she knew Fiona, but Ryu said she did not. The award is contractual, and they may accept or refuse it. The letter said this person also wants to participate privately. Coyote asked if the man was a guild representative, and the worker said no, surprised that a stranger would nominate him at that moment. Suspecting a trick by Lasha, he figured that even if it wasn't true he could go to the night ruins, and there was nothing wrong with taking the task, so he thanked the girl and said he would try to see her. In front of a building that looked like a fancy tofu shop, Keed told Ryu about it, even though she did not understand and wondered what he meant. They were about to go inside when the girl stopped him and pointed at the magical field. It looked strange, and he guessed it might be a trap, so he asked if it was dangerous, but she said probably not. Ryu said it might be connected to the door, though I didn't fully understand what was happening, and he thought someone was using a magical device instead of the intercom and told us to stay alert. Approaching the door carefully, they opened it and stepped inside, greeted by a friendly voice asking if Keed, San, or Ryu-chan was there. A girl said the guys looked exactly as they had described, and she found the makeup of their group quite strange. Keed froze when a fox beastman appeared before them. He asked if the girl was Fiona-san, and she smiled broadly and said yes. He certainly didn't expect this, and said he had heard she nominated him to conduct a private investigation of the recently discovered ruins. A young woman answered yes, and added it had nothing to do with the guild and was her private request. The ruins will probably be very different from what Keed expects, and she found them herself, so she was not lying. The deliberate tone made them suspect Lassie had arranged it, that the guild likely controls such information with methods like the guild card, and that the girl exploited a loophole to tell him. I asked Fiona about the ruins, and she said they are full of scary monsters, and the girl had tried to face them alone before but was forced to run back. The young man was surprised that she, an archaeologist, wanted to push herself. Fiona laughed and said she was confident in her endurance. She also said there was no need to speak so formally to her since she was not a big shot. Cade did not object, and they could not capture the ruins with artifacts. If she could use Ryu's hairpin, something might work, but when she heard about it, she immediately said he would not give it to her, and Fiona reassured her by saying he would not be able to take her even if she wanted to. The powerful artifact could only be used by a specific person, and it was interesting to study, though she probably could not analyze it because it was too advanced. Keed realized the hairpin was an artifact and wanted to know if there were any limits to using it. Young man, I asked if every artifact had authentication, and Fiona said only especially strong artifacts have that ability, and high-class artifacts choose an owner the moment they first appear so no one else can use them. Keed wanted to know the rank of Ryu's hairpin, and the girl said it had to be studied closely, but of all the magical instruments she had seen, it was the most perfect. Fiona was even amazed by the hairpin, and when Ryu asked if the girl owned such a wondrous artifact she agreed, prompting Keed to realize why Ryu would wear it and deepening the mystery. Curious, he asked the girl what reward she would give for his help, and she offered that he could take any artifacts hidden in the ruins without hindrance in exchange for 3 days of his help exploring them. The generous offer surprised the young man and piqued his interest. He thought the terms were too favorable for him, but the girl quickly assured him there was no problem. Her real interest was exploring the ruins, and she said the artifacts had little value to her since she could hardly analyze them. He realized her passion was archaeology rather than artifactology, and was pleasantly surprised by her modest knowledge of artifacts. Fiona admitted her knowledge of the ruins was very superficial, and said it would help a lot if the boys shared what they knew as they moved deeper into the unknown. Ree, without any embarrassment, asked her to share any information she had. Not bound by the guild's confidentiality rules, the girl said she could share her knowledge freely. The young man realized this was a loophole Lassie had cleverly used. You may share information freely if it is not part of an investigation and only comes from exploring the ruins, as this does not violate confidentiality. Fiona could explore the ruins, and he would gain valuable information about the artifacts. Overall, it looked like a good deal, and Cade knew he would benefit more than his new companion. At least he would not have to waste effort conquering the ruins. Intrigued by the prospect, he asked when they would set out on their journey. The girl said they would leave as soon as they were ready. The quick decision surprised the young man, but he did not object. She wanted to end it as soon as possible. He could have bargained for another 10 years, but the ominous phenomenon hanging over the world, like a ticking bomb without a timer, forced him to act immediately, so he decided to go now. They soon found a cave with a natural hot spring. Rhea was genuinely overjoyed, and Filny felt unusually hot. Keed asked whether the girl felt anything strange, and she replied that she sensed many magical instruments inside, but not a single large one. This implies that even if a pedestal holds a magic stone, it is likely already destroyed and probably contains magical devices set as traps. The young man asked what Fiona planned to do, and she replied that she wanted to confirm whether he had the strongest protection among them. Keed hesitated and said it was probably correct. She stepped closer, held out the magic instrument, and he began to examine it in surprise. She suggested he go ahead so he could follow behind and set traps along the way. That was their whole plan, and the young man was taken aback when he heard it. Realizing the girl wanted him to act as a trap detector and that Fiona knew about his strong defense, he suspected the object might be something remarkable and began to examine it. This item cancels a fatal attack on its owner and can be activated only once every 72 hours, and Fiona expected the young man would suffer fatal damage. He asked if she had any methods or items to disarm the traps, but she shook her head and said there was nothing she could do. Having often heard about the guild's remarkable achievements, she was sure they would succeed. Rhea shared that optimism, but Keed was not very enthusiastic about the plan. These two seemed not only compatible but even similar, and as a healing mage, the young man could not allow them to go ahead, so he had to accept her plan. Moving forward, Rhea sensed something odd and said there was a magical trap on the left, but it wasn't dangerous. Kaid wasn't happy and, confused, asked what she meant by safe. Tired, he suggested they simply go around the trap, but his foot accidentally stepped on something. Ryu saw what had happened and shouted to the man, but it was too late. The trap triggered, and an arrow flew the moment Keed looked down at his feet, confused. An arrow struck him, but his clothes stopped it, and the girls watched him in alarm as he stared at the arrow, unsure where it had come from. Kaidi thought it was a misfire, but the girl explained his defense power was irrationally high. Knowing it wasn't magic, Ryu couldn't detect it, and the boy told her not to worry, reassuring her everything was fine. He realized there were both magical and physical traps, with the physical ones seeming weak and likely meant to lower their guard, so he tried to identify and assess them. When Koit did this, he found there were many and decided he could just delete them, even though he knew deleting them would trigger all of them. He asked Fiona if it was a good plan and she agreed, though her expression made it clear she did not mean it. Koit went ahead and deleted them, and all the traps were activated. He asked Ryu where the magic traps were and how many there were, and the girl said one was right beside him. He didn't like that answer, because he couldn't see the trap no matter how hard he tried. Fiona said the magical traps were well hidden and she could usually spot several, but this time she couldn't find any, so he couldn't use the analysis. The girl called Rhea adorable, and Rhea giggled shyly. Keed knew he would have to rely on her to spot magical traps and asked what to do to disarm one. They told him he only had to step on it, but he thought it was dangerous. Rio reassured him, saying he'd be fine and that some traps were blocking the path, so he'd have to dodge them to avoid stepping on them. The boy asked Fiona what she thought and what would be activated if he stepped on a magical trap. It depended on the trap, she explained. On a previous visit, magical traps had summoned monsters, sent a downpour of freezing water, and caused other effects. Many simply drained her stamina, so she had to retreat. She would never step on them herself, but Rhea insisted he do it. Keed realized the girl really wanted it and knew more about magic than he did. In the end, he agreed to step on them. The boy stepped on the trap and froze in anticipation, but nothing happened. He asked why, and Ryu said that was exactly why she had told him to do it. Keed's power drained the trap's magic. Because the traps are well hidden, they hold only a small amount of magic. He misunderstood her and assumed the power he released had simply destroyed everything around him. He had already faced a similar situation, and although that's usually impossible, with Kayet it's normal. On their way they came upon a door, and the girls froze in surprise. He hesitated to go inside, worried the room might be full of traps, though it might not be. Fiona said the ruins used to be a facility and did not think anyone would set traps there. If it turned out to be a military site, traps would be possible. Judging the object relatively safe, he saw no need to set traps inside despite the corridor being full of them, and went to look inside anyway. The room's interior looked fine, though the wall pattern struck Fiona as out of place. She asked whether he had noticed the room was empty, since the former occupant had fled and might have left traps that could damage the object. He'd already thought this was the worst and wanted to quit, but Fiona asked him not to say that. Traps in the corridor suggested there might be hidden treasure, but even without them, the ruins were already important to study. Valuable discoveries could be behind secret doors and deep chambers. Even if the ruins looked empty at first glance, they could still hide surprises like the Herrera ruins. He reassured her that he was carrying out her request. When he asked whether they were finished in the room, Fiona said yes and that she would return later to check the small details, and added that if there was enough food he could make the ruins somewhat safe, so he decided to go to the deepest part first. With each step deeper, the corridors narrowed, the air changed noticeably, and the ceiling loomed too high. Rhea suddenly sensed something unusual ahead, a strange magic. He'd asked if this was different from the magical traps they'd faced before, and the girl said she didn't know, added that the magic seemed weak, and suggested he step on it. Fiona suggested retreat to avoid danger, leaving the boy alone. The plan didn't suit him at all, but he had no choice. The trap suddenly activated, and Ryu alerted everyone. That meant the trap was too strong for his magic to dispel. Kaidi wondered what kind of magical trap had been triggered. A rumble rolled through, and the man turned around, not understanding what was happening, as the girls realized something huge was approaching from behind. A trap caught them, a giant wheel rolled between two walls straight toward them, and the girls froze, not knowing what to do. Running at full speed was the only way out to avoid certain death under the wheel, and Ryu found it strange, because it looked like a complex mix of physical and magical traps. Despite the danger, the young man was delighted by the clever trap. Keed shouted at the girls to keep running while watching the approaching threat. Harnessing acceleration magic, he tore down the corridor at breakneck speed, leaving only a cloud of dust. This maneuver should have triggered all the traps ahead, stopping the man as he considered his next move. The metal wheel kept racing after the girls at full speed, and they barely managed to escape. Instead of running, he turned and walked toward the oncoming object, devising a bold plan. He told the girls he had a plan, and Rhea, still alert, asked whether he knew the object was practically indestructible. Coyote said he would not destroy it, only stop it by using magic to build a stone wall. The girls stood stunned, not understanding how it happened, until their amazement turned to horror when the wheel smashed through the wall and rolled relentlessly toward them. His voice shaking with fear, he ordered the girls to run forward. Horror filled their eyes, and barely holding back tears, they ran as fast as they could. The wheel kept turning, gaining speed. He assumed the slope was making it faster and that his magic could no longer stop it. After running some distance, he asked Rhea if a crossroads lay ahead, and she said it was on their left. At the crossroads they found a room. One of them asked if any monsters were inside, and Ryu said no one was there. As he ran in, his eyes fell on something that astonished him. He saw something immune to magic. He'd thought it was a trap, but that didn't make running away any safer. It was risky, but the wheel kept coming closer. Inside, they realized they were trapped, and the man told the girls to stay put. Using magic, he tried to destroy the wall, but it remained impregnable. Ryu suddenly felt something and shouted to Keed, asking in fear what was happening, then looked up and saw the roof of the hole come crashing down from the ceiling. Horrified, the young man watched as a large number of artifacts spilled out from there. They were Type 3 crushers, massive structures built to demolish everything in their path. Once they landed, they began attacking, and the others, confused, moved around the room to avoid colliding with them. Bulky machines tried to crush them with their weight but moved too slowly. Keed asked Rhea how many times he would need to strengthen his stone spear to defeat them, and she guessed 20 times. Surprised, he realized they had to buy time. Leaving the girls, he asked Rhea to protect Fiona, as he used acceleration magic to close in on the monsters. She watched him with admiration. The magic sword didn't work on metal, so he had an idea. He decided he had to aim at the crystals. Striking the crusher made the artifact react. Kaid mocked him and told him to strike again, but they began moving erratically, trying to hit him. Though the boy couldn't pierce their metal armor, he could still stop them from moving. Fiona feared she couldn't help, but Keed reassured her that protecting her was his duty. They had to get out of the room now. Using magic, he conjured a great many massive stone spears and aimed them at the crushers. A single swing destroyed them all and cleared a path to the exit. Fiona was surprised by his incredible strength, and the young man told her he was just a traveler. Ryu then noticed something and said she had found a magic stone. Assuming it was the power source for those machines, he suggested breaking it. Assuming it was a room, he told them as they walked down the hallway that those machines had destroyed him, and Rhea agreed. Then Kay heard Filny's voice. He saw her on her knees, crying because the precious documents had been torn to pieces. They set a trap that would destroy their own building, and neither the girl nor the boy understood what the trap maker intended. Ria called him over and asked him to move something, and when he followed her, he found it was a metal roller. He asked if she really wanted it moved and why, since there was nothing behind it. She said something was underneath, and he looked down, surprised. Keed agreed and tried to remove it in 123. He succeeded, and the girl was surprised by what she found. Ria found a sword, a cool find, and decided to bring it to the guy, but when she took the handle she paused to think. They discovered it was very heavy, and the young man who had asked to do it was surprised too. Even though it was heavy, he could hold it, and Fiona, amazed, asked how he managed to lift it, and said it was probably because the sword relied on gravity. Ka didn't understand what she meant, and assumed some kind of effect was attached to him that made him heavy. Examining it, he realized it truly was a gravity sword, incredibly strong and able to intensify gravity when swung downward, which baffled him as he wondered if he could fight with it using force. Fiona figured the sword had to be very powerful if Kaidi could handle it, because she had never heard anyone carry it since it was too heavy, and only a few travelers could lift it, but they already had their own weapons, so they did not need that sword. The young man asked if the sword would be needed for research because it was an artifact. She confirmed it was an artifact but not particularly rare, offered it to him, and he agreed. Fiona decided they'd done enough exploring for the day, and it was time to head back. Keed was surprised it was so quick, but only needed someone to trigger the traps and planned to fully excavate the ruins later. On the way back they chatted, and Fiona said so much had happened that day, and that, for the first time in a while, everything was going according to plan and she was having a lot of fun. Without warning, the girl pressed something, and both Ria and Keed noticed it, so the guys immediately froze in place. The Crushers were back. Fiona apologized for her mistake, and the young man said it was fine, already thinking about what to do next. He couldn't hit their crystals in such a confined space, and Ria asked why he didn't try that new sword. The sword's weight didn't slow him down, likely because of its enchantment. Keed leapt at them and swung his sword, the two-handed blade's full power revealed as it came down. The sword's destructive power far outmatched the wizard's, and a single blow cut the artifacts into pieces with little effort. Kaisen clearly liked this sword. Fionn thanked the two boys for their work, and since they were back safe and sound, suggested they discuss what to do next. Ria asked if they had finished the task, and he said they had not. Their goal was to find information about the destroyed artifacts. When Kaid asked whether she had found anything about the earthquake, she said she had, but it was completely unrelated to this. The boy thought they had searched in vain, but that was not true. Fiona asked if he knew Radam Kosa. The man said no and asked if that was the person's name. The woman said yes, and then added that the person was called Radam Kosvan Ortian. Only nobles have surnames in this world, and Fiona said his surname was Ordian, the name of a city, so the young man wondered if that made him the local lord, and whether it would be rude to address him without proper honors. She reassured him that there was nothing wrong with it and that everything was fine, explaining that in the city people treated him like dirt. He was not the ruler there, but only the successor, and it seemed everyone hated him. Fiona said that about a month ago, after the ruler herself left for the capital, Raydomkos became deputy ruler, started imposing exorbitant taxes for no reason, seized valuables from shops and even killed innocent people on false charges, and in general did as he pleased. Keed asked in bewilderment whether he was trash and a criminal, but she explained that duels are formal acts of free will and are not considered crimes. Killing an opponent in a duel was not considered a crime. That was the common sense of this world. The young man asked how the man was linked to the earthquake, and she said Raydomkos had forbidden the guild from revealing the information. She said it was only her opinion, but she believed he had stopped the earthquake investigation and embezzled the advance payment, leaving many people, including herself, struggling. Kite said he understood, but wanted to hear more from her. He asked the girl directly what she wanted them to do with this man, and after a sigh, she still told him she wanted him to pay. Desperate, she even admitted she'd be happy if the young man could kill him. Cade wondered if killing him would make him a criminal, but Fiani said Raydomkos often bullied people and killed them in duels, so Cade could rely on his E-rank adventurer status. People in this world believe rank equals strength, so the young man thought few adventurers would remain at rank E like him, and he believed those who impose heavy taxes cause suffering, and that anyone who destroys artifacts could be eliminated. He asked for time to think, and she had no choice but to agree. Killing the deputy lord was a serious request, and he didn't think Fiona was lying, but he wanted to be sure before accepting it. Deciding to gather information in the city first and then visit the man in person, he realized he didn't even know the man's face, and when something began happening on the way, he stopped to look. A stranger called the man a nasty old man while holding a bag. The stranger said the man should be grateful to him for allowing the man to give his taxes directly to Mr. Raydomko's. Kaid realized this was the man Fiona had mentioned. A man approached the townspeople and asked what was happening. The seller assumed he was a simple-minded traveler and told them to stay away. The merchant said this was a common trick of Raydomko's. Raydomko's finds a victim and makes their life hard by suddenly raising taxes tenfold. If they cannot pay, he seizes their belongings, and when nothing is left, he takes their shops. The man warned people not to even think about stopping him, because if anyone dared, he would accuse them of slander and force a duel to the death. Many people died because they could not ignore his behavior. Heidi realized the man was truly trash. That meant the rumors about his role in destroying the artifacts were probably true. The man sighed and said he wanted Forzen herself back soon and that he was tired of this shit. Suddenly Raydomko's called out to him, asking what he had said. Calling him a worthless commoner for daring to call him a piece of shit, he asked if he was ready to pay for those words. Confident of victory, he invoked Raydomko's and challenged him to a duel. The man told Kaidi to stay away so he wouldn't get dragged into it too. Raydomko's asked what he was talking about and said he was sure no one wanted to die. He planned to show mercy if the man paid a tax many times higher than usual and then forgot about it. The man tried to object. Kaya did not like the situation, and Ria covered her face. She covered her nose because the man gave off a strong odor. Already sweating, the man tried to explain that saying that was wrong, but everyone had already burst into laughter. Raydomko's looked around, saw them laughing, realized what was happening, and became angry. Calling Ria a little brat, the man said it was a noble scent, menacingly demanded to know how she dared say it stinks, and decided to make an example of her to teach everyone a lesson. When he stepped toward her, Cade tripped him and he hit the ground. The boy wasn't very good at role-playing games, but there was nothing to be done. Keed agreed it was a foul perfume, but said the smell came from his body and compared it to a piece of shit. Ria was surprised by how he spoke and by his missing outfit, and Keed said he took it off to appear weaker than Raydomko's. Rising from his knees, he insulted the young man, who assumed the man wanted to fight, and said a spoiled, incompetent nobleman could do nothing to him, and Kaidi asked whether he could stand up to the strongest E-rank adventurer. At first Raydomko's missed the rank, but when he heard it he grinned. It was great news, and he figured Keita and the other idiots would learn what happened if they stood up to him.